Washington State University. Online at NWP.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Moscow City Council meeting. This is August the 1st, and I'm not sure, but I don't see the fire chief here. I don't know if we have an occupancy issue as how many bodies we have in this room, but it's kind of delightful to see, actually, to be honest with you, as many folks that are here. And as we start off, we got a lot of people here, so let's give everybody respect and kind of civility as we talk along and move along. And I'm going to start. Those that are not standing, would you please rise and follow me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We should have kids here every week.
Okay, with that, we'll move on, and I will say that looking at where we're going, item number 7 is a request for the Hamilton Ice Rink. We will not move that down to 12th place tonight for you folks. just to show you our kindness, we'll keep everything in order. Yeah, but the next thing I have is a Farmers Market Weekly proclamation that I will be reading. Farmers Market Week proclamation. Whereas National Farmers Market Week recognizes important contributions by farmers and farmers markets across the United States. And whereas farmers markets stimulate regional economies by directly supporting local growers who reinvest in their communities. And whereas agriculture is Idaho's leading natural resource-based industry, contributing an estimated $9.76 billion annually to the state's economy, as reported by the Idaho State Department of Agriculture. And whereas preserving our state's farmland, including small farms, is critical to maintaining productivity, profitability, and food security. And whereas farmers markets in Idaho continue to grow in popularity. And whereas the Moscow's Farmer Market has been a vibrant part of our community since 1977, and it is the oldest operating farmers market in the state of Idaho. Whereas Moscow's award-winning Shop the Market enables use of electronic benefits transfer technology of EBT or Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program recipients to purchase wholesome, fresh foods and plant starts. And whereas the Moscow Farmers Market now accepts Women, Infants, and Children, formerly known as WIC, and Senior Farmers Market Nutrition Program benefits from Washington State residents. And whereas fresh food choices and dietary awareness generally improve health outcomes and reduces incidences of obesity, and whereas USDA Secretary Thomas Vilsack observed that the farmers markets play a key role in developing local and regional food systems that support the sustainability of family farms, revitalize rural communities, and provide opportunities for farmers and consumers to interact. Now, therefore, I, Bill Lambert, the mayor of the city of Moscow, Idaho, do hereby proclaim August the 7th through the 13th, 2016, to be National Farmers Week. And I urge all citizens to join me in recognizing and enjoying the many benefits of the Moscow's Farmers Market and other farmers markets in our area. And with that, I know we've got some from the Farmers Market Commission here. If you want to come up front, weave your way through the crowd, and we'll get a picture.
And staff.
And staff. Is Kathleen here?
No, she's not.
Okay, so you're the staff over in here. Let's all get in here. Right in the middle.
Yeah, we didn't even
Okay. And we need some more on the other side here. I guess we could get help here. He is. Here, we will do that one.
All right, you ready? Wait, incoming.
Hey, Zach.
Good job.
Great.
Well, thank you very much. Now, before we move on to the rest part of the agenda, I want to introduce a couple of people back here. We got a couple of our Latah County commissioners. We got Dick Walliser in the back, as well as Dave McGraw. Would you guys stand up and wave? So the folks who don't know, these are two of our county commissioners, and they work very, very well with the city of Moscow. They've been terrific. The one we're missing is Tom Lamar, and he is away on business in Boise. So You're very welcome. With that, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I would move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Art and a second by John Weber to approve the consent agenda as is. I'll start the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we will move on to the next thing, which is staff recognition report. Gary Reedner. We're kind of moving around in a little bit unusual order tonight. Gary, you have the podium, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a couple of staff recognitions we'd like to recognize tonight. The first, I'd like to ask Tyler Palmer and Rick Benjamin to come forward, if they would. And our Fleet Department has been awarded a Fleet Award by Government Fleet Magazine Leading Fleets Program in partnership with the American Public Works Association, which recognizes fleet operations that are leading the industry in innovations, ideas, and the way they face challenges. The purpose of the award is to drive industry toward thinking about lean fleet leaders. It recognizes those who are working hard to change their own fleets and their industries for the better, those who are thinking beyond the status quo. This is the second consecutive year that our fleet has been selected for this recognition. The City of Moscow Fleet Division was recognized largely for our Eco Driver program, low use reviews, comprehensive replacement program, and stringent specification and inspection processes. We're especially proud of this recognition as the vast majority of the recognized fleets are from cities far larger than Moscow, with considerably higher budgets and more abundant resources. So with that, I'd like to recognize Les McDonald as Public Works Director, Tyler Palmer as Operations in charge of Fleet, and Rick Benjamin, our Fleet Manager. So I have a plaque, Your Honor, if you'd come down and present that. Les, you want to come up?
I'm getting right behind them all. They can't see me.
Photobomb that.
And if I could have Tyler stay up here. And I'd like Todd Swanstrom and Evan Timar to come forward, please. Evan has just obtained his certification for an Operator 1 for the wastewater treatment plant, and a few words were penned by Mr. Swanstrom here as the manager of that plant in recognition of it's quite an accomplishment, so I'd like to read that if I can. Working at a wastewater treatment plant is the beginning of the journey, as the exam preparation takes most of the time. Studying the numerous volumes of wastewater literature takes months to be fully complete and comprehend. Although it is important to understand all aspects of wastewater treatment, it takes time and daily dedication to fully read and comprehend the complex wastewater information. The exam covers operational situations, science-based questions, math and algebraic questions, health and safety, mechanical aptitude, laboratory prowess, and much more. After 1 year of on-site experience in successfully passing the written examination, wastewater operators cannot stop there. Each operator, regardless of license level, must successfully complete a minimum of 6 hours or 6 CEUs of approved continuing education annually for license renewal. The continuing education units can be obtained from either an Idaho-approved online course or an approved applicable class. CEUs must be pertinent to the license holder's profession. The state of Idaho conducts periodic audits of licensed operators and will request proof that the minimum CEUs have been attained. Operators can lose their license if the CEU requirement is not properly maintained. It's a good note to mention that once an individual is licensed to treat wastewater, he or she can be held criminally responsible, I bet you didn't know that, Evan, for knowingly violating a permit or knowingly causing harm or pollution to a body of water. Although criminal activity is not prevalent in the wastewater profession, cases have been reported. Operators must be fully aware of the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System's permits and how their own actions can affect effluent characteristics and possibly lead to fines from the EPA. So Evan, we're very proud of you for obtaining that. Mr. Mayor, if you could come down, we'll get a photo. Can I get wide?
Nice.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a few minutes. Those guys are all leaving, but I like to brag on our city employees because I tell you what, as the mayor of Moscow, as well as all these councilors up here, we are so everly thankful whenever people's toilets flush and you turn on the water and it does work and garbage is being taken care of, because we know with those things, that's a huge battle to make sure those things work properly, and we've got a dedicated team that's constantly doing a wonderful job. And our fleet maintenance team that is under Tyler Palmer's leadership, as well as Les McDonald's, I don't remember the exact number of gallons of fuel that we saved this year. It was over 3,000, wasn't it, Les? You remember that number? Well, anyway, it was around 3,000 plus gallons of fuel that these guys economically saved from what we had in this current budget that ends this year, and it's because of the different uses and ways that they're doing things, and that's money in citizens' pockets. And so I just want, being as I had a large group here tonight, I just wanted to point that out for everybody, because that's a big deal for all of us. You know, anybody's a property owner, it's a big deal for all of us. And so with that, I thank all those men and women. Okay, we'll move on to the next thing, which is mayor's appointments, which I do not have any. We do have item number 4, which is public comment and mayor's response period. We always have a 15-minute period before we get into the meat of the agenda for people that can speak to us. Now, what we don't want anybody to talk about is anything that is on tonight's agenda. We're not going to speak about that, or anything that's in front of the Board of Adjustments or Planning and Zoning. So if somebody would like to come up and speak about something other than those things, we would ask you to state your name and address and limit your remarks to 3 minutes, please. And it is a challenge, so Joanne, I won't start the time until you start speaking. So.
Hello, I'm Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard. I'm here to talk about the mobility plan and the plan to build a motor bridge over Paradise Creek at 3rd Street. But first, since there's a wonderful big audience here, and since we're honoring the farmers market, I wanted to remind people that this Saturday, August 6th, is a Great Moscow Food Drive. We will be collecting food at the farmers market, Safeway, and Rose Hours for the Moscow Food Bank and the Trinity Pantry, and cash for the Children's Backpack Food Program. So if you have plenty to eat, please share some and bring some food. Okay, but that isn't what I'm here to talk about, as I said. And we really appreciate the opportunity to use this period to say something about the bridge, except that having just 3-minute sound bites is not really a proper way to discuss this very complex matter. So we'd like to again request that this subject be put on the agenda August 18th before the decision is made about the grant. I wanted to just say 2 things. When we worked on the comprehensive plan in 2000, which was approved in 2009, we had a development process that included 9 focus group interviews, 27 neighborhood meetings, 2 community meetings, 4 open house meetings, and 15 meetings of the 23-member steering committee. And they came up with this statement. 3rd Street, east of Hayes, has been a candidate for arterial or collector status for some years. Following an intense examination of the viability of such a decision, the City Council, Planning and Zoning Commission, and Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee found that any advantage that might be gained in east-west traffic movement was outweighed by the damage that such a designation could have on the livability of the city's principal historic residential district and major civic sites like East City Park, adjacent elementary school, the Moscow High School, and the 1912 Center, which is the location of the city's senior citizen center, among other activities. Now, unfortunately, this was part of the plan that all this work went into, but in his great wisdom, Walter Steed moved at the end of the public hearing that it be removed from the plan, and this was approved by the council. Now, this was the only paragraph in the 7 chapters of a plan this big that was removed. But the statement still stands as the opinion of the people that took part in these neighborhood discussions. And I want to say, I have another minute? I want to say that...
You actually are over your time, but I'll give you about another 30 seconds, Joanne, if you want. Thank you.
I just want to say that it isn't just the people who live right near the creek who are objecting to the idea of a motor bridge with 2,300 cars going back and forth from Mountain View up to Hayes. It's the people all along 3rd, a lot of whom I'm finding didn't know anything about it, and all the people in the Fort Russell neighborhood, and there are letters being circulated about it. So it's a community, and not only that, people who don't even live over here are worrying about the effect it's going to have on our city. Letters are being circulated about this subject, which you will be receiving soon. Thank you for letting me have the extra seconds.
Thank you, Joanne. Joanne brought up about the 3rd Street, and we've heard a number of different comments. And folks, this has been the first thing that I saw started in 1994, just going back to the research. So this isn't anything new. And yes, it's been discussed. And yes, there's a transportation plan. There's a multimodal plan that's been in front of various councils for 22 years that I know of. Now, what I would, being Joanne brought that up, I wouldn't mind hearing from others, but I've heard the same folks that have already spoke about this. If there's somebody different that would like to speak about that, I'd sure like to see them come up and address us. Give us your name and address, please. Go ahead, Mark, walk on over there, because it takes a while to weave.
My name is Kirsten LaPaglia, and my address is currently 520 3rd Street. I've lived in Moscow since 20 years now, and I love this town. I've lived in different areas of this town. And I heard of that recently, so I haven't formulated all my arguments, but I have been around long enough to talk with many people who are interested in how this town can grow sustainable in a way that we protect recreational areas, that we protect the downtown, which is increasingly becoming a little bit less trafficked. The main street now is becoming more pedestrian on Saturdays with the farmers market. And it seems to me really clear that the downtown area does include that first section of 3rd Street. So any kind of plan that the city has for moving forward with traffic, I would highly encourage a traffic slowness, I don't know how, slowification for Main Street and 3rd Street to keep increasing this value of that many people get, that brings many people into Moscow to enjoy the local restaurants where there's outside seating. Anyway, I think the bridge will be counter that sustainability of having a healthy downtown Moscow. But regardless, I think that needs to be looked at, that we need to keep slowing the downtown down in terms of traffic to make it safe. The one thing that I observe almost every weekday since a year or two, increasingly, is that there's huge traffic jam from traffic that comes from 3rd Street into flowing through across Main Street onto the main traffic pipelines. So currently there's already too much traffic coming from 3rd Street down from the area that will then increase traffic. And so I'm highly concerned about that. I don't see a solution for that because we're not, and there's already like don't turn right, there's increased signage that blocks the traffic flow into and from 3rd in different ways. So I don't really understand why somebody would consider opening that up as an increased traffic pipeline when we already have traffic jam every day coming down that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Mark Tribalpiece, 411 Harvest Drive. Obviously, I'm here for a different reason, but this bridge would affect myself and my family. Currently, there are 2 arteries to get from downtown Moscow to where I live, and one of them is under road construction. And seeing what's going on with that road construction, I can see that there will be much more of a bottleneck in front of the junior high in the future, which I'm absolutely okay with because the children's safety should be first and foremost. I do think that opening 3rd Street would be a great idea for this city because currently 6th Street and I believe it's C are the only options for me to move from one end of Moscow to the other without going out past Rodeo Drive or down White Avenue. I understand people don't want increased traffic in their neighborhood. Recently, Itani was just punched through near my house, and I had increased traffic, and honestly, it doesn't make a big difference in our neighborhood. And I just think that I think it's a good idea for the city to do this and would like the city to consider putting that bridge in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, my name's Laurel Eschen, and I, as of May 27th, just bought my first home on 3rd Street. I'm a Moscow native. I born in Gritman, went to Lena Whitmore Elementary, went to the junior high and Moscow High School. Have always really loved the East City Park area district. That's why I chose to buy my first home there. And I'm extremely concerned about opening up the road between 3rd and Mountain View. Prior to moving into my new home, I lived down on Cleveland Street in some apartments over there. That's on the corner of where Lena Whitmore playing fields are, Cleveland and 3rd. There are tons of children that live in those apartment complexes over there, for one. There's also the elementary school. For 2, I know Joanne mentioned the Senior Center, East City Park, all of these things. So I just think there's too much beauty in the neighborhood. There are too many young people. It's a level road. People like to ride their bikes up it. It's accessible to people with mobility issues, young people. I just think it's a really bad idea. And I also would not personally enjoy the extra noise. So.
Terrence Lowell. I live on Polk Street. In terms of the bridge, if you go through the daily news, I read it regularly, and look at the police reports, you'll find that every year there's a very minor accident near East City Park between a car and a kid on a bike. If you put the bridge through and increase traffic, there's going to be a lot more of those accidents. The cars are going to be moving faster. There's basically no question that this will lead to serious incidences. In terms of city development, putting arterials through the middle of a neighborhood seems like a strange way of doing things. In the short term, this may be a good decision, but as Moscow continues to grow, we're going to want to put roads that go around the city. That's how all major cities do it, not traffic through the middle. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, I don't know. One thing I would like to have somebody investigate is he said this guy talked about a bunch of different bike accidents at 3rd and East City Park, which I know of none. So I'd like to see the stats on that.
Statistics on that.
So, yep, I'd like to have those statistics so this council and I can find out on that. Any other comments before we move on, folks? Thank you. At this time, I will close that, but I will say one thing, and everybody in this room kind of understands this, I'm sure. Our city streets that were set out 100 and some years ago really weren't designed the way probably a city should have been for the size we are. I mean, it would have worked great for a town of 500 to 1,500. And so, you know, these things, as we grow as a town, streets are going to get pushed through, things are going to happen, and you know, everybody shares in part of that responsibility, folks, every single one of us. And our town is going to continue to grow. We need to grow so we can prosper, and we've seen all these young folks up here in this audience and stuff, so everybody gets a chance. So the point that I'm trying to make on this is we don't have certain neighborhoods that are more important necessarily than other neighborhoods. Yes, we've got the Russell District, which is historic. We all know that, and we're all very, very proud. That's a very fine culture and part of our town. But we also have lots of other neighborhoods that we care deeply about as well. And so we're going to move forward. I don't know. We'll see how things go on this. It's premature to have another discussion because we've talked about these things for 22 years that I know of. I went through and we did a history of this thing. It's been on the last two comprehensive plan rewrites, one in 1999 and one in 2009, and a number of different commission reports through Transportation Commission as well as the multimodal commissions that have brought things forward to us. So we'll just see how things go, and thank you very much for your comments. And we're going to move on to the next thing, which is number 5, Citizens Commission Report, and we are not going to have that tonight because the person that is in charge of that is somewhere on vacation, being August the 1st. So we're going to pick up the next time on that. With that, we'll move on to item number 6, which is the Blackbird Trail Station by Dwight Curtis. Dwight. Oh, by the way, I missed one guy I didn't notice. Tom Stroshine, would you please stand up? No, stand up. This guy here was a county commissioner for 12 years, and we just spotted you, Tom. So this guy's been an integral part of our community and county for a long, long time. Hey, Dwight.
Oh, good evening. As you can see, I have a lot of interest in my topic tonight. And, I'm sure that's why everybody's
We're dying to hear from you, Dwight.
Here a month or so ago, the council asked us to report to you a possible phasing development plan where we might go forward with development of the Blackbird Crossing Trail Station and do whatever work that we could in-house to save money and to actually get this thing going. And so here we are, and give you just a quick update or refresher of where this is at. You can see the Empire Mall, and just straight across the street, there's the old Tidyman's building, Paradise Path, and it's just right there. And from the pathway looking across to the, East Side Marketplace, you can see right where we'll construct this. Looking east on the trail, from the trail, you see a little bit of topography of what we need to deal with here. The station would be more toward the southern end. And aerial view, just to show you how it will kind of fit onto that, the old road bed there. Just a quick summary up front. On the present funding status, we have on hand current donations of just a little over $7,200. We have a pledge from the Latah Trail Foundation for.
Margaret, you want to introduce yourself so everybody knows who you are?
Sorry. Okay. I'm Margaret Dibble. I'm president of the board of the Latah Trail Foundation, and I was asked several meetings ago what the Latah Trail Foundation might hold, and I was assured there's no commitment there. So, yeah, we could probably come up with $2,000. We're not going to come up with $2,000 until we see some progress on it. We sort of have an agreement on in principle. We could probably do that, but to call it a pledge is maybe a little strong.
Well, Margaret, during that conversation that we had here a while back, that's exactly what was said because we wanted to see something happen with that money. And for the audience out here, there's been money in this account for a long time.
There has
so we're
been
going to
money.
try to do something to take the funds that are there It's not going to be as much as we want, but that's what we plan on doing because we want to make something happen with that this summer. So thank you, but that's exactly how it was. And Dwight, you can explain what we're going to do. So Mark will know.
All right. Well, remove that $2,000 and or as a maybe. And we also, if you'll recall, Mr. Thompson recently passed away, and there was a memorial request out to the friends and families to donate money toward trees to go along that area, along the pathway. And talking to family, we just received about $1,100. This is in addition to more, but just recently that they were happy to for us to use this money toward the plantings and trees that would go directly around this facility. So, like I said earlier, most of this work would be done in-house. Work by the staff will take place as time and funding permits. We don't have enough staff to just drop everything and do this. We have to do our other job and work this in as we can, but we think it's doable. Phase 1 would take place this fall. Phase 2, hopefully this spring as funding allows. And Phase 3 as funding allows. And as you'll see as we go through this, some of Phase 3 could happen just about any time. And of course, along with this would be concentrated efforts to raise more funding for this, including the Latah Trail Foundation. And so this would go towards signs. We would use social media, et cetera, to try to raise these funds. Phase 1, this would be the work that we would try to do this fall. Of course, we have permitting, and this has already been submitted. We're just waiting on word back. Verbally, we feel confident that there won't be any issues with this. Earthwork, include erosion control and clearing the area and adding in some extra rock. We have to have a culvert extension to that. And in-house, our expenses, and this is the dollars, not the staff time cost, would be about $1,260, and we're estimating about 120 staff hours to do Phase 1 this fall. Phase 2 be this next spring, summer, providing we've got the funding, working in the water, trenching the drinking fountain area, electrical work, flat work, which is the concrete, and that the estimate was about $18,000 hard cash and about 300 staff hours. Phase 3, and this one's kind of the loosey one, and it all just depends on the timing of some of the others, and that would be the topsoil, all that, the final finishing touches. Benches, things like that are popular with the donations. We'll keep trying for those. And then, of course, at the end, this one, about $10,000, not including the art piece. We don't know what that is yet. And about another 160 staff hours. And with this, some of this, there could be some donated labor in there as well. So that staff, you could conceivably cut those hours down. Just as a reminder, this is the trail station out in Pullman, and granted, ours would look a lot better.
Well, we'll see after
a better
Phase 3.
name, just all those things. But anyway, this was the concept that we were shooting for. And this was the concept that came out that was approved, a few years ago. And, of course, Phase 1 is basically trying to get this part at least all established as far as the gravel, get the buildup that we have to do right around these far edges, and get that part done so that has some time to settle, and basically it just sets the groundwork for the rest of the project. And that's what we would try to get done this fall.
Yep.
And that's what I've got. You wanted to report, that's our plan, and I hope that meets with your satisfaction. I think it's doable, and we can get this thing going. Once people see something happening, especially Lake Trail Foundation, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to donate some more money.
Is Margaret
and,
still
we can
here?
get
I
it done
can't.
sooner.
Well, yeah, okay, Margaret. Well,
Oh,
we'll
I
hold his
thought
feet
she
to the
left.
fire
I'm
and
sorry.
see what Phase 1 does. How's that sound?
And that's what I have, if you have any questions.
Questions for Dwight? Thank you very much, Dwight, for that report. And one of the things, folks, we've had that money, I don't know how long, in our budget just sitting there. We've had people that have donated wanting to know what we're going to do with it. And so this is how this thing started. Well, let's get something going on it so we can build from there. So that's the direction we're headed. Thank you very much,
All
Dwight.
right, thank you.
Now we will move on to item number 7, the anticipated request from the ice rink for Hamilton funds. Gary Reedner will do the presentation, so we will move forward with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you might guess from the crowd in the room tonight, the main event tonight is the request from the Moscow Ice Rink Association for pledge or commitment of Hamilton funding for construction of an ice rink. As is stated in the background that's in your packets, I'll just recite that for everyone. The Palouse Ice Rink Association operates an ice rink located at Latah County Fairgrounds for the past 15 years. PIR is a not-for-profit IRS 501c3. The current ice rink is a fabric-covered structure that is nearing the end of its useful life. The PIR is in process of obtaining funding for the construction of a new permanent structure ice rink to be located at the current site and with an estimated cost of $3.6 million. As the council knows, that current ice rink is on land that is owned by Latah County at the Latah County Fairgrounds and is leased under a 50-year agreement to the Ice Rink Association. PIR is engaged in a fundraising effort to obtain funding to construct the proposed ice rink and has approached the mayor and city council to request participation from the city in the form of money from the Hamilton Fund. Currently, the Hamilton Fund has a balance of approximately $2.9 million. The Hamilton funds are restricted for use by the terms of Bob Hamilton's bequest to the city of Moscow that the funds be used for the benefit of the Parks and Recreation Department, to be used as much as possible for the benefit of young children. Previous expenditures from the Hamilton Fund approved by City Council have included construction and operations costs of the Hamilton Indoor Rec Center and participation in the construction costs of the Moscow School District community playfields, as well as an initial $165,000 commitment to the original Palouse Ice Rink Association for the ice rink that you see at the fairgrounds at this time, and also participated in another 2 years after that for repairs of the chiller at that facility. So with that, you have in your packets a letter from Mark McGuire, who's the president of PIR, requesting that $1 million worth of funding. This is the first time, other than the initial $165,000, that a request has been fully considered by the council to take public funds and transfer them, in essence, or commit them to a private organization, in this case, a 501c3 nonprofit. So with that, there are additional things that the council needs to consider in considering the request. As I've talked to Bob Stout and Tony Mangini, two of the representatives of the ice rink, we've talked about some of the conditions that may be put on this funding, and I've listed some of those in the packet, and I'll go through those a little bit. Tonight, it is my hope that as the council considers the request, that if the council has questions, that the request will be considered. Staff will be given direction on continuing discussions with the ice rink regarding what those conditions, under which conditions, if the council decides to commit funding, under which conditions that funding would be granted. Some of those conditions include, number one, the amount considered. You saw in the request from Mr. McGuire that they're requesting $1 million of Hamilton funds. When those funds would be available, and in a situation like this, sometimes it's referred to as capstone funding. A fundraising effort will occur, and some corporation or some charitable organization comes in, provides the funding to put the organization over the top for the construction, and that way you get good positive publicity. As I've discussed with Bob Stout, the city, at least it would be my recommendation, that if the council is going to commit these funds, that enough conditions are placed on the funding that it does not leave the city's coffers until the project is for sure going to move ahead. By example, the council a couple of weeks ago considered a request by Sojourners Alliance for funding to continue operations of their resident facility, and the council at that time committed $12,500 contingent and on condition that Sojourners were able to raise the other $112,500. So again, when public monies are committed to a non-public purpose, the entity has to be very careful, the government has to be very careful that those funds are well spent. Secondly, conformance with the mandates of the Hamilton bequest. I cited you the section of Bob Hamilton's will that indicates that the funds that can be used out of this fund need to be used as much as possible for the benefit of young children. Looking at the business plan and discussions that have been had between the ice rink, council leadership, and the mayor, I believe Tony's going to talk about how the ice rink will be made available to the young people of Moscow, and that is something that will also have to be considered and should be the subject of some negotiations so that that time is quality time for the youth of Moscow. Time, of course, in the middle of the night or when the kids are in school probably isn't going to meet the mandates that are necessary under the bequest. And then because, again, PIR is a 501c3 private nonprofit, that the facility is located upon public land pursuant to a 50-year lease from Latah County. One also has to consider that PIR as a corporation has a legal life just like a human being, and that legal life could end, they could cease operations, in which case the city has placed $1 million of public fund in a facility that may not be available for public use. Now, if you read the lease from the county, there is a provision that upon the termination of the lease, the property as well as the improvements revert to Latah County. So it may be something that we need to discuss at Latah County. I've not had that discussion with Tony or the ice rink, so we can continue to do that. But illustrating that it is going to take some time to consider those conditions, any additional conditions the council would like to explore, and then it would be my suggestion that once that is done, we continue to flesh that out. Staff could be tasked with putting together a resolution, which is an official statement of council policy, upon which the conditions that the funds would be made available. In addition, one has to consider the time frame of this funding, how long PIR expects it will take to raise the money to construct the ice rink, how long the council is willing to commit a certain amount of money for that. So those are all considerations that I'd ask the council to consider tonight as they listen to PIR's presentation. Thank you.
Well, it's questions for Gary before we get going into this thing. Should we go ahead? Okay, so we're going to hear from Mark and Tony, or Tony and
Certainly.
Mark. I seen Mark. Some of those. Okay, Mark and then Tony. How do you?
Mr. Mayor, council members, Gary Reeder, thank you for the opportunity to present our request.
Please introduce yourself.
Mark McGuire. I'm president of the Palouse Ice Rink Association, and I live in 1908 East D Street in Moscow.
Thank you, Mark.
And I hope you can see from the turnout here that I think Bob Hamilton's money would be well placed in the pursuit of offering the youth, the children, the young children of Moscow the opportunity for recreational activities in a period of time from October through April, of which there are a few other opportunities really in the Moscow vicinity. I've asked for the $1 million request from the Hamilton funds to support our plan, and at this time I will pass the torch on to Tony Mangini, the Vice President of the Palouse Ice Rink, to provide a short presentation about the success of our temporary 15-year-old facility and how well it's done to offer opportunities for the youth and children and families in Moscow. Tony?
Hi, my name is Tony Mangini. I live at 606 Conestoga here in Moscow. I would like to thank Mayor Lambert, City Council, Gary Reedner, and the rest of the staff for making the time for us to give this presentation tonight. Also appreciate the members of this community showing up and showing their support. Our slogan has been small rink, big demand, and I think it says a lot about what we've been trying to do in the past and where we're trying to go in the future. The rink has had a lot of success in 15 years and had a lot of challenges. But overall, we feel very good about where we are. It's been a slow process to get to this point, and we appreciate you making the time to listen to what we have to propose. Just some basics, and Mr. Reedner had already covered a lot of this stuff. We're a 501c3. Our organization consists of 8 members. We're a collection of different members of the community, business owners, a couple professors, or a couple members of the University of Idaho. I believe they're all professors, some attorneys, and they picked me to do the presentation. I'm the CFO for NRS in my day job.
You're doing fine, Tony.
Thank you. And then we have a rink manager that will run the operation day to day. So we do have a separation of duties. Our main focus right now is this project, trying to secure funding and make the permanent ice rink reality. Kind of a general overview of why we need the ice rink. We draw a lot of people, and we've done that for a long time. Even as primitive as the facility is, we bring in a lot of people. They have birthday parties at open skate or at public skates. Clearly, we have a lot of kids that participate in our youth programs, and so it just has reached the point where we need a bigger facility to fulfill the mission that we've had from the beginning, which is to offer a full selection of resources and ice-related activities. I added the note about the U of I students selecting us as best weekend to hang out. It was kind of a surprise to us. It wasn't like something we solicited. They contacted us and notified us of the selection. Students have a reputation for having a preference to locations that serve alcoholic beverages. So the idea that the ice rink, as it stands, the way it is one of their favorite weekend hangouts, I think it says a lot. I think it says a lot about what this facility can mean to a lot of different people. Like it's been mentioned many times, that the original structure was built on a temporary basis. The shell is beginning to fail. If anybody remembers the windstorm that happened last fall, I believe it was around November, we did suffer a little bit of damage. We were able to get a replacement piece for the section that was damaged. It was a relatively small section. It was more of a finishing piece on the west end of the rink, but we were able to get that fixed. But we're going to see more problems like that just because of the age and the condition of the facility right now. I was the person that sat through the hearings with the Board of Adjustments, and we were able to get the SUP extended till July of 2019. That happened last month. The message I got was, happy to see you. We don't want to see you again because you need to get that rink built, which is part of our motivation for being here tonight. The current facility is 3/4 size. I think we've done amazing things with what we have, but it certainly, its limitations has caused some challenges for us. We have a lot of kids that are at an age where it just doesn't work for their size. We actually have some kids tonight. I've seen, actually I have a couple of players from the varsity team this last spring that won their tournament within the division they play in. And it reaches a point where you get to size you can't play 5-on-5 hockey, which is what normal hockey is. We adapt and we play 4-on-4 with the adults, but for the kids it just doesn't work just because of the nature of the competition that they play. And so a lot of these kids are forced to play up in Cheney. They will practice in Moscow on some nights, but they also do practicing and they do their home games up at the Cheney facility. So there's a lot of traveling back and forth for families to do that. And then the figure skating program has probably been the one that struggled the most because of our facility. They really have had a hard time maintaining coaches, really beyond just basic figure skating skills. It's really difficult for them to do much more with a 3/4 size sheet of ice. And it's something that they've been struggling with for a long time, and certainly something we'd like to address in the future. The sound issue has always been a challenge for us just because it limits our hours of operation. We've done our best to be good neighbors. And unfortunately, from a business side, it does limit our ability to service our users and generate revenue. But we've made do with the best we can with that over the years. And then just the limited facilities, we use a porta potty. Like I mentioned, we were missing a section of our roof last year. And if anybody was in there in December last year, it looked like a snowy scene in a winter wonderland at points, just because the snow was coming into the facility. And people had good attitudes about it and a sense of humor. But I think at some point we really would like to have a real roof on our facility. Who will benefit? Well, as you can see here tonight, there's a lot of young people that would benefit from it. We have great support from our user groups, and so we were really excited to be able to take this to the next step and do more for them. I just mentioned figure skating. We do have a program, Science on Ice. Mayor Lambert mentioned that we're not as concerned about hours during the day, or actually maybe as Mr. Edner. Some of the best programs we offer are during the day. Science on Ice is a great example of it. It was a great opportunity for us to find a use for time that's difficult to rent, but it gives kids a great experience, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here in a little bit. Honestly, my favorite section as far as what this means to the community is public skating. It's the opportunity for families to come down to the rink and do something fun. Get some exercise. The winters can be long, and this community, this area, the Palouse, is so amazing on the resources it offers for the summertime with the bike trails, the mountains. There's just so many different things you can do outdoors for exercise, entertainment, socializing. But in the wintertime, it's a challenge around here. We don't have a ski hill, and we don't have some of the other resources other communities have. The ice rink is really one of the few we have that's there for everybody. You don't have to be a college student. You don't have to work for a certain company. You just have to pay $5 and go. And so it's a lot of fun. I think it's a great opportunity. It's honestly the thing that got me involved with this. I don't have a kid that plays hockey. I know a lot of us are associated, just assume that we must be here because our kids must play. I'm not in that boat. I just see what this thing means for our community and what it does, and I think public skating really embodies that. The adult hockey program is also a very good program. I'll talk about it more here coming up. Curling is another program we've had. And then just special events. One of the most common requests we get is sororities and fraternities just wanting to rent our facility. And maybe that has something to do with why we were voted best weekend hangout on the Palouse, because a lot of the college students like to just have something to do. And so it's been a great part of our organization. So the youth hockey, we start with we call them PIHA, Palouse Youth Hockey Association. They've been there from the very beginning. It's a very dedicated group of parents that make this thing happen. They offer the opportunities to boys, girls. The thing that really impresses me, and I umpire baseball as a side project because I need something else to do with my life. What I really like about with the hockey programs is there's a lot of resources for training coaches. And that's the thing I notice as an umpire is a lot of the people that are coaching are volunteers and they have great intentions. They don't know what they're doing. And USA Hockey has a great program. All coaches are required to go through training. It's very regimented. And it gives the kids, I think, a better experience to learn the game of hockey, more so than other sports have, just because there's resources there by design to make sure that the coaches are qualified and can help their players. And so I think that third point is a huge part of what makes our program so successful. And another thing in the last point, the scholarships. This is a big deal because the cost of playing hockey isn't cheap. I don't care how old you are. If you want to play, it's not the cheapest sport, but we have resources available. So if there's a family, if there's a kid that really wants to play hockey, we'll make it happen. And I think that's an important part. I think that's really important in fulfilling what the Hamilton Fund was trying to accomplish. If you look at the graph in the bottom left-hand corner, it just shows you kind of visual, and I apologize it's not a little more clear, but over the last 7 years, just how much we've grown. And the thing you notice, if you look at the different groups of bars from left to right, the left would be the youngest kids and the right would be the older kids. And you see a decline on the older kids, and part of that is normal natural attrition, but I would have to hazard to guess a good portion of that is also families that just make the decision. It's just too difficult to do the traveling. So again, having a bigger facility would help us to expand our program and hopefully get more kids involved with hockey. Our other youth program is the Polar Bears, and they've been around for a couple years, and they are specific to girls hockey, and they focus on 9 to 19-year-olds. And part of their mission is to really open the sport up to everybody. Sometimes the perception with hockey is it's kind of really for the kids that have been playing from day one. Hockey starts at age 5, so if you don't get on in the beginning, or maybe if you're not as aggressive of a personality, you may feel like you can't be a part of it. And that's part of the Polar Bears mission, is to kind of get away from that. Oh, sorry.
I've got a question for you, Tony, because the slide before the presentation, you got 5 groups of kids from 5 up to 18 or 19. Mm-hmm. Now, is that different from this group of kids? These are girls only from 9 to 19. Are they part of those other numbers as well, or is that this separate?
That was PIHA specific, so this would be a separate group. I believe the Polar Bears, and I know the president's here tonight, and she can maybe answer this question better than me. My understanding is they have about 40 participants, give or take a few, and I think they try and split it up. I believe it's either 3 groups or 2 groups, so they try to make it age appropriate. Part of it for them is finding tournaments, and a lot of times tournaments will be 15U or 17U, so you have to find a combination that fits within what the tournaments will allow and within what makes sense within the group of players. So they do split it up. I just don't know the specifics. Does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
They are required to do some traveling, again, similar to PIHA, just you have to go where the tournaments are. I mentioned it's been around for about 2 years, and they'll be starting the 3rd season this fall, and they do have about 40 players. And just a side note, we do have players that do participate in both divisions, which actually is a good thing because it helps for some of the girls that are new to hockey. I think, like with any sport, having people around you that are familiar with the sport, they can help raise their skill level. So I think that's been a very positive thing for this program. Figure skating, we talked about it a little bit before. It's a very limited program, and it was kind of hard to find pictures for it, to be honest with you. And so we're hoping to see this thing grow. The girl in the blue on the far right, she just graduated my daughter, so that's been a few years from now. So we're hoping to see this program grow and be a bigger part of what we do. Science on Ice, mentioned that before. This kind of gives some of the specs. We've got a large number of schools around the area that's participated, 500 students a year, so it's a pretty significant program in its own right. We got some great support from local businesses, Decagon Devices and Terra Graphics, which is great because it gives the ability to offer funding to schools when they're struggling to make it work, whether it be covering the cost of the session or getting bus transportation and so forth. So it's a good part of what we do. We had a second slide, but I decided to leave it out. But I think it's important to kind of talk about what it does, and because we can talk about, okay, well, it does science, but what exactly does it do? Well, here's some examples. Properties of water, molecules in motion, phase changes, and how the Zamboni smooths the ice. I'd like to see that part myself because I really don't know. Newton's second law of motion, force, mass, and acceleration, using hockey pucks and slingshots. The other program they have is rotational mass and action, distribution of mass, and how do ice skaters twirl. And the way they set it up is they'll have 3 stations. The kids will cycle through the stations. They keep them engaged. They get to do hands-on science. So it's a very popular part of the program. And then as part of the coming to the ice rink, they also get the opportunity to skate. And so they're provided with ice skates and actually just get some exercise and have fun. So this has been a really great program for us. There's a testimony from a teacher up there in the upper left. And we get a lot of positive feedback from them. One of the things that the students do is they always write a thank you card, and we get a bunch of those too. And it's just, it's a feel good, it's a positive thing, but it also gives us an opportunity to get people familiar with who we are too. It's great that we're pro hockey, and I think there's a lot of people in this community who seem to think that's all we do. I think it's a great example that we're so much more than that. And here's an opportunity for young people to get some hands-on education, but also see what the ice rink is all about. So that's been a really good program for us. Public skating, yeah, this one's near and dear for me. We typically have hours available on the weekends, evenings, and holidays. I don't know if you guys remember, but I did talk to the City Council back in February, and the numbers I was given by our manager at the time was during the Christmas holiday we had over 1,600 visitors. Non-season pass holders, we're talking about people that just came to the facility to go skating with their family, with their friends, and I think that really is it's kind of a staggering number for me. I didn't realize it was quite that big. But it just shows how popular that facility is for people looking for something to do. The demographics, you'll see little kids as soon as they can put skates on and stand upright. I've seen multi-generation groups skating. So it really does appeal to a broad group of participants. I don't know, just looking through it, I mean, we have birthday parties almost every weekend. In our simple little structure, I mean, it looks like some of the shanties where if you've ever seen lake fishing, that's kind of what the rooms look like. They're not fancy, but I think it just shows you if a kid really wants to have their birthday there and they're willing to be in those kind of conditions, it tells you something, that they're having fun. And that's really what it comes down to, is people want to spend their time and spend their money doing something they enjoy. And public skating is certainly a part of that. The fifth point talks about cost. And for example, I mean, we always try and keep our costs as low as possible. Most users are paying between $2 and $5 per session, but a family of 6 could get a family skate pass for $25. Compare taking that same family of 6 to the movie theater, and you're probably into it for $60 or more, depending on if you do 3D or not. So, and then lastly, like I mentioned, the holidays. You know, that's one of the great things about the ice rink is when there's holidays, whether it's Christmas or spring break, it's a lot of times when we need to have public skating because there's not as much demand. The youth programs are typically on break during holiday, at least for part of it. And so it's a great marriage for us in the community that we can make those times available for people to just go skating. Adult hockey. So this is our program. We have about 160 players. I put this picture in. The scoreboard in the back. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But that is the new scoreboard that we were able to acquire last December. We've got different skill levels. It's co-ed. And we do have the U of I and Washington State men's teams. I believe the men's team is actually working with the Lewiston rink right now as far as ice time, but they have worked with us in the past. Assuming we had a full-size sheet, I believe they'd be back with us in the future. But I believe the women's Wazoo team, I know they participate in our co-ed league as a team, and then they've also rented ice time from us as well. You know, I think there's a tendency in this community to discount the value of adult sports, which I think is unfortunate. Because if you think about what motivates these kids to play sports, because I've been thinking about this all day. I'm sure I drive my wife crazy. I'm 46. I still play sports. I'm a big kid at heart. I was trying to think, you know, why did I get into sports? What got me going on it? And the best answer I can come up with is when I was a kid, my dad had a trophy shelf that had a few trophies from when he was a kid playing sports, and he was my hero. And it was part of what motivated me. It was part of what got me excited about it, because I wanted to be like my dad. And so I think it's really important that we do have programs like these. A lot of the parents that are involved, whether they're coaches or just supporters of this rink, they happen to play, but that's certainly not their main motivation. It's still about the kids. And the adult hockey program, our ice times are usually Sunday evenings, late 9 o'clock or later for weeknights, and then some slots on Fridays when there's not a youth tournament. So definitely the lion's share of the prime ice time is reserved for the kids, which is the way we want it to be. But I think it would be unfortunate to think that adult hockey doesn't play an important role in our program. I think that's part of what keeps our program so healthy is the combination of adults and youths playing. I know I was kind of jealous, not to put Mark McGuire on the spot, but his son just graduated. His son was a member of the varsity team. And as the rink was getting ready to shut down, we did just kind of a for fun staff and board members and family members skate. And he got to skate with his son. And I think that's such a cool thing. I think that's really part of why people get so excited, why all of us have been putting our time into it is it's more than just kids, it's family. And I think that's a very positive thing about what the adult hockey program does for the youth program. I think they complement each other very well. And I think it's a big motivator for why you have so many kids here tonight that are excited about the sport. Because honestly, I mean, when you have to compete against things like video games and all these other choices kids have to participate in something, honestly, how do you get them excited about playing a sport with all these weird rules that don't make any sense and all this weird equipment you got to wear? What gets them excited? I think it's having a parent there that's lacing up your skates and telling you good job and wanting to be a part of it. I think there is a correlation between the two, and I think this is a very good part of our program. Curling is another program it's been a challenge just because of our size, trying to have enough space to get them into the schedule as much as we'd like. And certainly with a larger rink, we believe we'd have some opportunities. We'd be able to have more lanes. Curling is kind of similar to like horseshoes or shuffleboard. You need a certain amount of space to play the game. Right now we're limited to 3 lanes. Most full-size sheet of ice I've seen typically have 4, which would give us the ability just to service more users. So kind of the nuts and bolts. What are we trying to do? Well, we currently have a 50-year lease on the fairgrounds property. We are trying to build a full-size sheet structure, fully enclosed, that meets the needs of our user groups, that is in compliance with all of the city ordinances, will last for a long time, and will allow us to be the community-oriented rink that we've been trying to be. And we believe we can do that. We got some renderings here, and a big thanks has to go out to Mark McGuire's daughter. She works for an architecture firm over in Seattle, and her boss was generous enough to let her do some pro bono work for us. So this is just taking the dimensions of the renderings coming up and making it look more real, more of a 3-dimensional model. A lot of the businesses around town were nice enough to let us incorporate their logos into the image just to give it a more authentic feel. These are real people in the community that appear in the facility. Kind of gives you an idea of the space. We anticipate on the west end of the rink to have a sitting area that would be on the right side of the image. The rental booth would be kind of in the background there. We just think it would, with that dimensions, the size, it would be a good fit. You can kind of see if you go to the rink now, it's usually pretty crowded. Having a little more space would definitely give the users a little more opportunity for room to skate around. The second rendering, these are actually hockey players from the Moscow varsity team included in the image. Just again, kind of gives you a sense of the scale, kind of what we're trying to do with the space. And then this is just an overhead shot of what we anticipate. A couple things to note. We anticipate having seating capacity of about 270 people, and that was something we debated quite a bit. You want enough to meet the needs of the users, but you really don't want to build so much that it's just idle space. And we felt like that was a number that would fit within the financial limitations and what the user needs are. So when we do host a tournament for the different age groups, that the families traveling from out of town would have reasonable seating to watch the game. To give you an idea, if you look where the pointer is right now, basically that's where the families huddle at our current rink. There's some bleachers right there. They all kind of cluster together and root for their kids, their team. It's not ideal. We make it work. We're pretty creative. But I think this would do a better job of servicing the needs of our visitors and of our families here with this layout. So how are we getting this done? So this is kind of a combination of what we've done so far and where we want to go going forward. The big thing is we hired Bob Stout Fundraising Bob's been great to work with. He's definitely given us a lot of ideas, helped us with our communications, and given us some direction. And so we're really excited that Bob's helping us. We have been able to acquire some assets, the big one being the dasher boards from the Spokane Arena. I have heard the phrase before that this facility we're trying to build is the Taj Mahal. I hope people pay attention to the dasher board acquisition and understand that's certainly not our intention. There's just a cost associated with building this facility, but we're not above being creative in this process. We learned last summer that the Spokane Arena was looking to change out their dasher boards. We worked closely, a couple of our board members, Pete Robichaud and Steve Bush, worked with the members from Spokane Arena, negotiated a very favorable price of $5,000, and we were able to get the dasher boards. We had originally had a line item budget schedule for that particular piece of the project of $195,000. So you don't have to be real good at math to know that there was a pretty significant savings with that acquisition. Currently, those boards, well, I'll save, we got a slide coming up for that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The scoreboard, I showed you in the slide earlier, that was an acquisition that came from a paddle raise. Mayor Lambert was very helpful with that. That was, I believe, our gala from March or April of 15. And by December of 15, we got it installed. And so, again, we've been guilty as an organization of a lot of talk. And to me, the scoreboard was a symbol of a change in how we operate. When we say we're going to do something, we are going to put every effort we can to make it happen. And we were able to get that scoreboard done. And it's going to go nicely in our new facility down the road. We also installed some heaters. Our friends at Grop Electric were wonderful. They worked with us, gave us a great price, and gave us some nice heaters, which I know a lot of the users appreciated later in the spring as they got installed. So how do we? What needs to happen financially to finish this job? We're looking at raising about $2.6 million in donations. Currently, we have $200,000 in cash and $200,000 in pledges, so that would leave about a balance of $2.2 million. We have expectations that we can raise $500,000 in grants. We know that the Coeur d'Alene Rink was successful in securing a pretty sizable grant from the Murdoch Foundation. We have a list of other grant sources besides the two listed, but we do believe that's an attainable number. And then the loans, we have a couple different options. Ideally, we prefer just to do a straight loan, but being a not-for-profit, there's a challenge as far as having the collateral to make that happen. So we'll either have to find a person who's willing to guarantee or entity willing to guarantee the loan, back the note, or we could look at doing a USDA loan. It can be done, it's just a little more costly, so we'll just have to weigh our options and see what works best. But we believe that we can make that happen. I mentioned the dasher boards, so that's actually what they look like. They're in storage right now. We got a lot of help from City North American Moving and Storage. They were generous enough to do most of the work pro bono. About the only thing they got out of it, besides our gratitude, was a advertisement on our dasher boards. And we also have a farm over in Troy, I believe, which is actually holding the Jones Custom Farms. Is holding the dasher boards for us. It's exciting. It's really a big step for us because we pulled the trigger. We actually bought something, but the clock is ticking. The longer that equipment sits in storage, the more likely it could be damaged. And so that's part of our reason for wanting to get going in this process. So this just kind of breaks down some of the cost estimates. The facility itself, I believe it works out to be, it says 31,000 square feet. Kind of breaks it down a little bit in the business plan that we provided. It gives you a more detailed breakdown. So this is kind of a very 10,000-foot view of the project. But really, we're trying to keep this thing as low cost as possible. But the reality is, with any kind of a project, there's just inherent costs associated with construction. So the call to action, and the cat's already out of the bag because it's already been discussed, but we're here tonight to ask for the city to consider making $1 million available to this project. And really for us, it comes down to creating leverage. We have a lot of donors that we have talked to that are very interested in the project. But the donors are in the same position as the city in one respect, is everybody wants to see it happen. Nobody wants to be the one writing a check for something that never comes to fruition. And so we're hoping by working together, by building this partnership, that we can make a physical ice rink appear and not just a fantasy. And I'm not much on fantasies. I'm an accountant by trade. I believe in taking chances and working hard and trying to make something happen, and that's what we're here tonight trying to do. And you know, we talk a lot about Moscow, but you know, this really is a Palouse facility. It's just Moscow happens to be the one that gets to host it. A lot of our families, a lot of our patrons, they're from Pullman, they're from towns surrounding the area, and they enjoy the facility. And I think it's a privilege for us to be able to be the site of it. And I think that's an exciting aspect of this project. And the picture in the middle, and I wish I would have been a part of it at that time. That's one of the original groups when they're trying to get this thing built to begin with. And I think that's really says a lot about this whole project. Is it's very grassroots. It's families. It's just community members that had an idea that they thought they could make happen, and so they went for it. And I like to see myself as the next generation in that process of taking a long shot, because don't be fooled. There's still a lot of work to be done. Even if the city were to agree tonight, this request is 28% of the total project, which means 72% of the project still needs, something has to happen. We do have a small amount of money set in our accounts, but the reality is most of what we need is yet to come, even if the city gets on board. So we're not fooling ourselves. We still have a lot of work to do, but we believe with the things that we've done, we've got the resources and the people in place to make them happen. This slide here just shows revenue. If you go through it, you'll notice that we did see a decline in the last fiscal year. You know, part of it was trying to reduce some of our expenses, and I apologize we don't have that included in this presentation. But we try and run a lean operation. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that we do generate over $200,000 in revenue per year. And that's a lot of just trying to charge what we need to charge to operate our facility. So it's a lot of $5 charges here and there. Adult hockey typically pays a premium. We're kind of on the higher end of the scale, which we accept. It's just part of what it takes to run an ice rink. So I think overall we believe with the expansion of the facility that we would see a nice increase in our cash flow. You're looking at it's not quite double, probably about a 70-75% increase the next year. And a lot of that is just coming from expanding hours and being able to have more people on the ice. And then also being able to host, they call them bantam and midgets, which would be the equivalent of JV and varsity hockey. You know, we currently don't host tournaments for those kids. If we could host those tournaments, it adds to our revenue, not to mention the effect it has for the city. So we're optimistic that with this change, it would change our abilities to increase our cash flow, and which is part of why we believe we would be able to manage the debt obligation that we'd be looking at as part of the equation. So kind of a general economic impact, and I don't know if Mr. Peterson would like to jump in on some of this part. But we believe beyond just the benefit for the kids and for our user base, there's certainly a lot of positive aspects for the local economy. Just the effect the dollars have, bringing outside dollars, the dollars, just getting people active in the community. So they're all positive aspects for our facility. Steve, would you like to talk about it a little bit? I'm going to hand this off to Steve Peterson.
Thank you.
Hello, Steve.
Hello. I've been associated with the rink for about 10 years. This is the third update of an economic impact assessment I've done. And what I've discovered is what you see up on the slide there. The ice rink here is a vibrant niche cottage industry in the off-peak recreation season with high marginal benefits to the Moscow economy. It has close ties to the University of Idaho and Washington State University. I personally I've talked to 10 of my students that have said that they stayed at the University of Idaho, at least 10 to 20 that they stayed at the University of Idaho because of the ice rink. And I think it's an important source for future retention and recruiting of students both at the U of I and at WSU. Every 2 students that attend the University of Idaho in the long run create 1 job in the Moscow economy. And so I think that's an important source of potential economic activity. It brings all of these impacts that I'm about to show you is from new monies coming into Moscow. So these are net new funds coming into Moscow, and it represents athletics and their families with strong, intense preferences. And I think this room is a good example of those intense preferences. People with intense preferences tend to spend lots of money, and they have whether they want to or not.
The parents spend some money when
they
take
tend to
these
have,
kids to these
strong
things.
strong economic impacts. So this is what I found. Currently, this little 3-quarter rink creates 11 permanent jobs in the Moscow economy, supports a payroll of about 222,000, and supports total state and local taxes of about 39,000. We estimate in the future, and I think these are very conservative, the total permanent jobs in the community would be 37, just under 40, a payroll of nearly $750,000, and state and local taxes of about $156,000. So it'll have a substantial impact to the regional economy. I think it'll complement the other strengths of Moscow, particularly bringing visitors and spending here in the off-peak season. Then I estimated what the construction impacts would be. This would be over 1 year, create about 45 jobs, $1.37 million in payroll, and about $104,000 in tax contribution. So I think that this will contribute to the livability of Moscow, bring visitors and spending here in the off-peak season, create jobs, and complement our other strengths in the community. So thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
What's that?
Thank
you, Dr. Peterson.
Economic investment.
We good?
What we didn't do is you introduced Steve, but one of our counselors up here didn't know Steve's name. Steve from the University of Idaho, Steve Peterson, our local economist on all these wonderful numbers.
So this is our grand finale. Originally, we had a collage of different shots, and I switched it to this shot because I really think this is the image I wanted to leave the council with, is that our facility is really a collection of adults who had a dream, had a vision, and they're doing it for the kids. And I think this really, a lot of the people in this picture, I believe, are in this room tonight. They put in a lot of work making our youth program successful. And I think that's true about our board and the rest of our user groups. Is they're just people with a lot of passion, a lot of desire, and they make something very positive happen for this community. And so we're just trying to take it to the next step. I appreciate the council and Mayor Lambert and city staff's time, and the folks that came tonight to support us, and especially our front gallery here. I know it's hard to sit still for a long period of time, especially when Pokemon Go's very popular these days. So
it's a gym here. It's a gym. It's a gym.
It's a gym.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means.
I'm way. Go ahead, continue,
I'm
Tony.
way out of my I threw that out. It's way out of my comfort level. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to everybody for giving us the time. I'm happy to answer any questions. But the biggest thing is we're excited to work with the city. We're not trying to put anybody in an awkward position. Certainly, there's other opportunities for this money. We just happen to feel very strongly that we have a good cause. And we're willing to work with this group in any way we can to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Tony, you did a wonderful presentation. Thank you for taking the time to be very adequate and integral on all your numbers and facts and figures and all the different things that go with the ice rink. And I got to share with you, the day the new scoreboard was there, I got a chance to drop the puck, and I will tell you so much. I was so happy that somebody put a heater in like 2 days before I was there, because I found I found this one spot that is actually warm there, and that's where I stood as long as I possibly could because it felt so good. But, you know, I've been to the ice rink extravaganzas that you folks have had, and you talked about being part of the pollution. You're absolutely right, because I've been to those things, 300-400 people there, and there's people from Pullman and all around their surrounding communities that it's a big deal for them. Personally, as a mayor, the group, I don't know of a group that has worked any harder to do something over the years to make things happen. And I know some of those numbers that you had up there, Tony, on the new numbers were reflective of the things you can do on a full rink rather than a three-quarters rink, because you can't have competition, you can't have tournaments here because of the size of it, and so that's where you're justifying those additional numbers that came up on that spreadsheet that you showed us. I'm sure the council is going to have a ton of questions. There's a couple of more people that I'd like to hear talk that I've got in mind that I want to listen to. And you mentioned one number. You mentioned that with $1 million that the city would give, and as with the other monies that you have, you'd still have to have 72% funding. I know Bob Stout's in the audience, and he is the driver of getting this money, so I'd like to hear some comments from him as well as both of our county commissioners on their feel for it, because of course it's on county property. And then I'm going to open it up for the council to ask anybody questions. So Bob, if you would please introduce yourself to us all.
Thank you. Bob Stout. I live in 208 South 3rd in Garfield, Washington. I think this represents what we can do from a momentum standpoint. So the last 6 months, maybe 8 months, we've been out talking to donors, and prospects, business people within the community and outside the community, and a lot of foundations and granting opportunities, and they kind of need to know that it's real, and I think that's from a fundraising standpoint. I think the city's buy-in with this from this Great Hamilton Lowe's Fund would help me, help us to get some momentum from a fundraising standpoint, that we have people behind us in this community. I think that's where your all decision kind of represents that for us to move forward. So, I'm cautiously optimistic because I've met with a lot of people that are donors and prospects, and they love this project, and I think they're ready to go on it. I think once we get to that point to where we can really push this forward and know we have the funds in place, I think we're, I'm optimistic, because as a fundraiser you have to be, or you're not going to last long in this business.
Well, if you're not optimistic, we got the wrong guy, right?
Exactly. So, but this project resonates with donors that I meet with, and I think a lot of it you see here with the kids and the youth activities, and so it's been a fun project for me to work on. I think we've just got started now, and I think we're ready to make this final push and kind of to really close some of these larger gifts.
Okay, we've got both our county commissioners, Dick Walther and Dave McGraw. You guys want to make a few comments? And one of the reasons, folks, it's kind of an interesting thing. We have this on county property, and the council, of course, with the Hamilton funds, they're very frugal, not only frugal, but they want to be able to spend them and use them for the right in the spirit of what that fund was set up for. And so that's a big deal for everybody up here, too. So, Dave, you want to introduce
Thank you, Mr.
yourself,
Mayor,
sir?
Council. First of all, former Commissioner Storshein, it's great to see you, my friend. Good to see you here. So, how many people in this room are under the age of 18? Okay. About 5 years ago, every month we have our Director of Youth Probation Services at Latah County gives us a report to the commissioners. Commissioner Strorshaw and I were sitting there, and our director at the time made mention of the fact that the crime rate in Latah County amongst youth had been dropping. And we said, well, what do you suppose is causing that? He says, well, he thought for a minute, and he said, well, I have no scientific background to back this up or anything, but he says, I've got to tell you, we started to see that drop in crime start to happen right about the time that ice rink got built. So I think I think that speaks volumes about what this thing does. Typically, the crime rate amongst youth in Latah County anyway it's very low in the summer, and the crime rate amongst youth goes up in the winter. That has leveled off and has started to drop down in the last several years this ice rink has been here. And that's mainly because kids have a lot of things to do in Moscow in the summertime. They got the ball fields, they got bike trails was mentioned, and a bunch of other stuff like that. So I I just don't see how you can go wrong funding this thing. We are the landlords of the property out there. Our role in this, I think Commissioner Storshine was on board when we did the lease. I think we did the very best we could to do a very, very favorable lease to the ice rink people so that they could get their fundraising and make the economics of this whole thing work out. All these people who raise their hands who aren't quite 18, they'll be voting in a couple of years, so when you think about this...
So this was a 50-year lease you're talking about, Dave?
This was a 50-year lease we'd put up with them. Of course, 5 years of that's gone now. In their fundraising efforts, it's been taking them a little while. So any questions you have? I'm one commissioner of three, of course, and we'd have to talk about it, but whatever commissioners are here in 40 years or whenever they want to start talking about the renewal of the lease, that will come into play. So,
Commissioner Wallace, would you like to comment, or are you good with things? Okay, well, thank you, Dave. You very well may have a question to ask of you, but I was never involved in ICE because there was none of that sort of thing when I was a younger guy or as a coach. I coached baseball for 9 years, and I remember as a coach, and I'd show up at home with 6 or 7 new baseball bats and about 30 new balls, and a few new mitts. My wife would say, well, because I had 2 boys, and she knew they weren't for just those boys because they're all different sized bats and stuff. And that's what you do as a coach. You're buying equipment, you're buying stuff, and you invest. And I had all kinds of things. And I don't even know if I shared with her all the different stuff I bought. They'd just show up. Of course, I didn't fool her. She'd spot them eventually because she could flush it out of me. But so I know as a parent what that was like, and I wanted my boys to stay busy. I wanted to know where my 2 boys were at. And now I got 5 grandchildren, and those 2 boys are wanting to know where their kids are. And these guys is aged and somewhat younger, and so that's a big deal. Use sports to me. With that, I'm going to open up to council for questions for anybody, whether it be Tony or Mark or Steve Peterson, Dave McGraw, Bob Stout. So, Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. Tony, as has been mentioned, this request is for Hamilton funds. And in what's in our packet, I can't really tell what the true mix of youth, and let's call it 18 and under, versus other users is. I don't know, it's up to the council, of course. I don't know that we're in a position tonight with other questions we may have to make a motion and a move on this, but if it does continue on, and I'm a fan, I'll admit that, I would like to see a comprehensive list or analysis of users now and projected by age. You've got some numbers in the packet, but you mentioned some youth, female youth groups that didn't appear to be in the data that was in here. If we could get a comprehensive age analysis of who's using the rink now, whether it's those that are with their families when they come to open skate or whatever, you can qualify it as much as you need to in terms of estimate and the others that you know.
Right.
And then extrapolate that into a full-size rink number. I would appreciate it.
Hang on a second, John. Catherine had a question.
I'm going to
and then I'll
follow
come
up.
back
Thank
to
you for
John.
presenting. It's a great
She
thing.
asked about 10 minutes ago.
My question has to do with page 37 in the packet, and it has to do with where all the present ice rinks are. I don't know if you have that one.
Yeah, actually.
And I'm connecting it to tournaments. And my question, and I concur with Walter really in terms of there's so much to take in. There's a lot of information, but I feel like I need a little more. And so having a greater understanding of the tournaments and that flow of people that move, because there are quite a few large rinks around the area, and then what that means as, because you have the projection, the economic projection of people that come to town. So does that mean the creation of tournaments and how that changes things? So maybe could that be part of the business plan as well, the tournament piece?
Well, most age levels try and host one tournament a year, and right now we do 3. the three youngest groups. So what we would anticipate happening is adding a tournament for the Bantams, the JV team, and the varsity team. I imagine the varsity team may schedule some games because they play more of a normal schedule instead of just tournaments. Teams are traveling. I believe there's a team in Coeur d'Alene. I know a lot of the teams are based out of Canada. So they may do less of a tournament and more just having home games. But the anticipation would be to add 2 tournaments. I know the varsity team went to Missoula right around, I believe it was New Year's weekend, and they were there for a multi-day tournament. So I think we'd probably model something similar to that. Okay. So we're looking at probably adding the 2 in addition to the 3 we currently do.
Okay. And just to follow up, so that actually kind of folds into capacity. So when you showed the bar graphs and you had, they had up to 70 kids. So what are you thinking as capacity for especially, the way the Hamilton mission is written with youth, that younger group? How do you see that changing, especially when you know the amount of kids in the school district or Lake Todd County wide, and then to kind of go further with that to deal with kids that can't afford it, and then can you have kids that don't have parents skate? There's a lot of stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, there is.
Yeah, so you brought up a lot of wonderful things, but I see that we got to do some digging, some more digging.
Certainly. Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Mark.
Don't mean to take Tony's spotlight here, but I think you'll see that the numbers have been increasing at the younger age group. And one of the best things about USA Hockey is that they are all about ice efficiency. And so, one, getting the kids on the ice so they're not watching in a practice, but there's stations all over the ice. And so if you go to a mite practice, there will be 50, 60, 70 kids on the ice at any given time. And so if we go to a full-size sheet of ice, the model of USA Hockey would include up to probably 90, 95, and I know that Idaho Falls is able to have those young kids 95 on the ice at any given practice. And so the opportunity just becomes much, much greater for more kids with a full sheet of ice.
John.
Yeah, this is a statement more than a question. And with the Hamilton Low funds, we are supposed to use them for the benefit of the youth as much as possible. And with a $3.6 million projected budget to build this particular ice rink, and then if you take the $1 million that you people are requesting from the Hamilton Low Fund, that comes out to somewhere between 25-28%. And I think just by the number of people we have here, the young girls, the young boys, and that doesn't count all of you folks that are over 18, that's just right here. I think that we can say without a doubt that that money, that $1 million, would be well spent if we can do something to help these kids. I think help is the wrong word. Give them an opportunity to have some fun that is constructive, it's physical, learn teamwork, and all of those other things that we expect out of ourselves and generally don't deliver very well. And as far as some of the other issues that Gary brought up, I think that if we as the council direct Gary and staff that we want these situations that we have to deal with brought to the forefront, give us answers and solutions, and let us deal with this as quickly as possible, because I think that we as a society here in town have got a large group of people that want to see something done. They have raised some money, they have spent some money. They've done a great job with the kids in town. They've done a great job with themselves. So I, to tell you the truth, would be more than willing to vote yes for this right now. I think I'm probably a little early for a motion. You guys aren't supposed to clap now.
But John, if the good thing would be see you on a set of skates. That's what I'd like to see.
They don't build deep enough ice or big enough skates.
Well, we got some other counselors, both Gina and Jim have not, as well as Art, have not spoke yet. And there's some other things. I know that in order to do this, the council will have to come up with a resolution. I mean, not right on that, Gary. A resolution wrote up. I mean, there's a lot of moving numbers here. John, you talked about the $1 million in relationship to the $3.6 million, and you're right on track. It's 28%. It's 27.777. And they had mentioned, Tony had mentioned that 72% of the funding was coming from outside the source, and that's exactly how the numbers work out. What would be interesting, Walter asked about kids and numbers of kids and stuff, and maybe it might even be wise to have the percentage of people that use this as kids, whatever that percentage is. If it's 25%, if it's 31%, 32%, whatever, I think that would be an important.
And I have no problem with the adult usage. Don't misunderstand. I would like some comfort in that you're not having 1 million people use it and 20,000 of them, big number, or 18 under 18. I'd like to see what the ratios are a little bit and get a little better comfort level. That's all.
Okay.
You have to go to the podium.
Come on up here, introduce yourself and your name. Even though we know you, we need to have you.
Hi, my name is Anna Lynn Mickelson, and I live at 2215 Orchard Avenue, and I'm a board member of the Palouse Ice Rink. I know that from our numbers, more than 40% of our revenue, our yearly revenue, is from Palouse Youth Hockey Association. So 40% every year is from the youth, just from Youth Hockey Association. And that doesn't include public skating, that doesn't include science on ice, or any of the other activities where youth are present. So every year, at least 40%, if not more, is from youth hockey.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Could I add something?
To touch on her comment, please.
Okay.
I would like to compliment you. If from what I'm seeing in the package here, y'all are running in the black. I mean, I felt it very unusual to have this type of request come to us by an organization that's not running in the red all the time and needing money to get them a bigger facility so they can run in the black. Y'all are running in the black. You're making a small profit every year, and I want to commend you for that.
Appreciate that. You know, I think that the other thing to look at besides the quantity of the time is the value of the time being allocated. Every Monday through Thursday evening, starting at, I believe, 5:15, it's youth sports. It's the hockey. And the adult users aren't given time until 9 p.m. And that's by design. I think.
Well, that'd be an important stat right there too, Tony. During your operating hours, what kind of ratio has the youth on there? Is it 42%, 58% as a percentage?
Oh, right. Well, I mean, definitely. And then you look at
because numbers. The thing of it is numbers, and the reason, folks, numbers are important is because the Hamilton Fund very, very elegantly stipulates about youth sports and using it for youth. And so if we have percentages, that works out. I mean, that works out to me real well because I'm a numbers guy and I like percentages. And it's easier to see that if we know that 48% of the time is for youth during operations. I mean, that's kind of an important.
Sure, certainly. Well, so some perspective on that. So say from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., which is when we have to stop. We use that time from 5 to 9 for youth and then 9 to 10 for adults. So using that math, 80% of the prime time, the time that we could sell for the best value if we were just trying to generate maximum revenue, is allocated to the kids. So I mean, I guess my concern is you could spend that number in a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, there's only so many hours that people realistically can use the facility. People have jobs. They have kids are in school. People have obligations.
Weekends though too. It's got different operating hours.
Certainly.
Too,
absolutely.
So you could spread that out as well, Tony. I mean,
absolutely.
And part of that would be followed in the overall equation. That wouldn't be that tough. And I don't think it'd be that hard to do. You're the accountant. I'm just a numbers guy. But does that sound?
We could do that,
workable?
certainly.
Art, you?
Yeah, I was just going to do another John Weber pronouncement more than a question, in that I'm also a big supporter of this whole idea, and I've wobbled around embarrassingly around that rink a few times in the past and wish I could have done better. But I also think that the Hamilton Fund has not been given to the city to sit in a bank and do nothing. I think it's there to actually get out, be used, and do things. And mostly my thoughts center around the, no offense to any of our lawyer people here, but center around legalities where we need to set up a form of memorandum of understanding with you guys relative to how long are the funds available for, perhaps temporally coincident with the duration of the SUP, guaranteeing the youth activities go on, and then, as was pointed out, what happens if the Palouse ice rink people go defunct? Who gets the facility? What happens to it at that point? Also, to ensure that the construction conforms to the city ordinances and the strictures of the SUP. So if those can be worked out between the city and the ice rink, then I see no reason why this should not go forward with full funding from the city of $1 million.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Art on that. I think all the graphics in the presentation about the amount of youth that is going to use this facility and uses the current facility is obvious that it's within the parameters of the Hamilton bequest. And so I'm very much in support of it, and I think we just need to cover the contingencies of what could go wrong and how do we deal with that on the other end. And as soon as we've got that covered, I'd be more than happy to vote in favor of the $1 million.
Gina?
I could not agree more. I would like to find a way, though, to have kids at our meetings more often. It's just way more fun.
They're not agreeing with you.
They're smiling at me, and I'm happy with that. I do agree. I think if we can get some of these questions, Art was very eloquent in his listing of them. I think we need to answer some of those things. But I think it's definitely a great project, and Tony, you did a good job. Way to go.
Hang on a second, John. Gary, we covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything that we've missed that we need to discuss?
Well, I think just the questions of the council indicate there are conditions that need to be placed on the bequested funds. And it's not just a matter, with all no offense taken by the cut at the lawyers, but the public does have an interest in these funds, and the council has an obligation to disperse them in conformance with the bequest. So I think it's a matter of just making sure your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted. It would seem to me that the way we should proceed at this point, or my recommendation would be that if the council's positive about moving forward and we get direction in that way, we can meet with the ice rink representatives, lay out all the conditions, propose those, agree on those at least as technicians, bring those to a council committee, let you go through those and determine at that time, look at the whole package, and then say, okay, now you consider the request for $1 million according to these conditions in this resolution. You make the motion, you vote for it, and off you go. But you have something in front of you, so both parties know exactly what they're going to be held to. And that can be done fairly short order. We have a committee meeting next week. A week from now, we could certainly start working on it. I'm not saying we'd have anything ready by then, but we can certainly start working on it. As Tony said, there are lawyers in the PIR camp, so I'm sure they can get someone to look at our work.
The sooner we get things done, the better. Thank God for the lawyers, because I follow the rules about 30% of the time. So I need some good advice from time to time on things I do. John?
Actually, Bill, Gary answered my question. I think we should move on this as quickly as possible. And I think we owe it to these kids, owe it to these parents, these community people, to come up with an answer as quickly as possible. Art laid out some of the questions, him being smart and all. And
thank you, John.
Anyway, I had to throw that in just so. But yeah, I think we ought to move ahead with this as quickly as possible, get the information in front of the administrative or the Public Works Finance Committee as quickly as possible, get it back to us, and come up with a vote which I think would be positive, and then turn Bob Stout and his crew and the rest of you loose to come up with some more donations.
I see a guy out there, John Kimberly. If you want to make a comment, John, come up here and announce who you are so everybody, even though most of us know who you are, we still need to have your name and address, sir.
Mayor Lambert, council, and staff. John Kimberling, 1923 East E Street. I'm here to show my support as well tonight. Wanted to tell you a quick story. Before Bob Hamilton ever spoke to the city, I had the privilege of visiting with him on several occasions in my office. He was a really interesting guy. He wasn't a guy that wanted to be out front. He probably wouldn't come tonight, even if he was here and able. But I can tell you, if he was here, he would give his unqualified support to you voting for the ice rink. He told me about his upbringing. It was tough. He was really poor, his family, and when we spoke, all he could talk about is that I've got more money than I can ever spend, and I just want to make a difference in this community. He's already doing that, but this would just be another great way to honor his legacy and what he's done, and I sense you're headed that direction. So for whatever that's worth, I think you're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, I think everybody...
I know. Well, what about me?
I think everybody, after including the mayor, is very in favor of the ice rink. I mean, that's just black and white. I've been out to a number of the different ice extravaganzas, and I continue to be out there because it's a fun time with everybody. I enjoy the heck out of it. We need some kind of a motion. Gary, could you kind of tell us what we should come up with? I think council's looking for a direction to make a proper motion. Or did you have one?
It's right here.
Had the 5 points and just launch.
Well, okay. Why don't you make it then? We'll see if you did it right.
Is that all right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So I would move that we direct staff to work with the Palouse Ice Rink Association to come together with a memorandum of understanding or a contract that iterates points that include, as of this moment, the duration of time in which this money can be accessed, perhaps coincident temporally with the 3 years remaining on the SUP, that it include the youth activity guarantee, that there be some thought given to what happens should the Ice Rink Association go down, who takes possession of the facility, who runs it, issues surrounding property ownership in this rather convoluted county, city, Ice Rink Association way. Also that the construction would conform to city ordinances and obligations, and that it would also conform with the SUP strictures.
Second.
Uh-oh, I've gone wrong. I've gone off the
Okay, was there
rails.
something that needs to be added he missed?
If you just add in any other things that are
Additions.
relevant to the distribution
Yeah.
of Hamilton
Anything
funds.
else staff can think of?
Yeah, just, right, now, that's my fear, is that
Ability
the
to
motion
address-
lays out just the specifics.
Yep.
There could be big holes in there that we won't be authorized to deal with,
And
which I'm
also
sure
the-
these folks would like us to deal with.
The flexibility to negotiate any differences in thought on the process.
Thank you.
Does that sound good?
That'll work.
Judy, you have it over there? I'm not going to read the motion back because I can't repeat all that stuff that these guys all said, but you've got it in writing. So we're good to go. John, I'll start to roll with you.
An enthusiastic aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we'll move on, and the staff's got the direction. We'll move this.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you all very much, Gary. So the staff's direction is to get as quickly as possible with the ice rink folks so we can move this in an expedient way so that we're not.
I'll
it's
be
not
in touch
lingering.
with the ice rink tomorrow.
Okay, now I want to make a comment to you kids down there. You did an outstanding job sitting there on your rear ends for 2 hours. I could have done that. I have a tough time doing it as a 64-year-old guy. I can't imagine doing it, but you kids were great tonight. Thank you for coming. Walter?
Mr. Mayor, I would be remiss with this size crowd in this room not to invite you all back 2 weeks from tonight at 7 p.m. for the public hearing on the city's budget.
And he says that because he won't be here. So thank you, Walter. So with that, I think what we're going to do, we're going to take a 10-minute recess for those folks who want to leave, got all the kids. Thank you so very much. It was a fun evening seeing you all here. Thank you very much. 10-minute recess. We'll come back at 9:04.
That's what I want.
Well, we're
Okay.
down to the usual suspects.
Ah, right
Okay, so
on.
are you ready to go back there, Zach? You ready? All right. Okay, everybody, we are resuming our meeting, and we are going to item 8, which is amendment to MCC Title IX, Chapters 3 and 4, peddlers, solicitors, canvassers, vendors, by Rod Hall. Rod, you got the floor, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council. Hope it wasn't me that drove everybody out of the room after the comments about lawyers.
I can't believe they didn't hang around.
First thing I have up for you tonight, item 8, is an amendment to the Moscow City Code Title IX, Chapters 3 and 11, specifically Moscow City Code 9-38 and Moscow 9-11-9, dealing with the registration of peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, and the licensings of vendors. We had an applicant that came in and was trying to get a vendor's license, and during the review process over at the police department, Roger Lanier, Captain Lanier, noticed that the categories that were prohibiting the issuance of a vendor's license by the city were more restrictive than that for the registration of peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, or even of the issuance of taxi cab operator license. And for a vendor, they're going to be in an open public space. Peddlers and solicitors, you're inviting them, or they're getting a license, basically registration to go to your door. Taxi cab, we're not allowing people to get in the cab, and who knows what's going to happen. So it didn't seem that it was fair that under the current code, we are prohibited from licensing anyone who has ever committed a felony or a crime of theft as a vendor. Most of our code usually has some kind of qualifying, within the last 5 years. People make a mistake, but they can change, and they shouldn't always be held subject to stuff that they did in the past, that people do change and become better people. So basically what we're proposing is replacing the vendors section that deals with denial with that of the section under the code that deals with peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers, with a minor modification to that section, so that many of the reasons for denying a license or even the registration would only go back 5 years. So if they have had a clean record for 5 years, they would be eligible. With these amendments, both the vendor's licensing and the registration of the peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers will read the same for the reasons for denying either one of those. And we believe that making these amendments would make our code more consistent, fair, and equitable to all. And that's all I have on that.
Okay. Questions for Rod? Walter?
So just to be clear, Rod, you're saying that the vendors code at present was felt to be too restrictive, and so this will ease it up to match the peddlers and the other such folks that we have already in code.
That's correct.
Okay.
I read it as trying to be less discriminatory.
Yeah, we went through this in admin commission last Monday, and given Rod's presentation here, which is very similar to that one, I'm going to move to approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary.
I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion by Jim and a second by John to approve the ordinance under the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. Everybody square on this? Walter, we'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Okay, and we will move on, and this is ordinance 2016-14, 12, 16, 15. I'll calm down.
Pick a number.
It's a dash 16.
Your Honor, if you could, we will add the number tomorrow.
Okay, this is ordinance number dash 2016. Sometime tomorrow we'll have the other part. It is an ordinance in the City of Moscow, Idaho Municipal Corporation of the State of Idaho providing for the amendment of the Moscow City Code 9, Chapters 3 and 11 relating to the denial of peddlers, solicitors, and canvassers registration and vendor's license, providing that the provision of this ordinance be deemed severable and providing for this ordinance to be in full force effect from the date of its passage, approval, publication according to law.
Your Honor, if I may, I just
Yes.
found out the ordinance number should be 2016-09.
Okay, so that was dash 2016-09. I don't have to read it again, do I?
No, sir.
Everybody okay with it? All right, let's move on to item number 9. Amendment to MCC Title IX, Chapter 6 and 7, catering permits. Rod, you had the floor again, sir.
Thank you again. Thank you, Mayor and Council. The amendment I have before you today is an amendment to Title IX, Chapters 6 and 7, dealing with our alcohol catering permits. During this last legislative session, the 2016 legislature amended Idaho Code 23-34A, that is the state code relating to alcohol catering permits. The law was changed to expand or enlarge the time for catering permits from 3 days to 5 days. And the proposed amendment changes our city code to match that, to be consistent with state code from 3 days to 5 days. The reason this came about, because I'm surprised the commissioners left, somebody from the Latah County Fair, I think the manager of the fair, and you're the manager of the fair, correct? Came to his councils up at the prosecutor's office and asked and said, hey, the law changed from 3 to 5 days. We have a Latah County Fair that lasts 4 days, and we have vendors that would probably like to exercise that. And so he talked to their legal counsel, who called me and asked me, what are the chances of the city amending their code? I said, well, I'll put it before them and we'll find out. And so there's also just another minor change to the Moscow City Code to make it more consistent with state code, changing from liquor to alcohol, because under the state code it talks just about alcohol catering permits or alcohol licenses, depend on what kind of alcohol license you have, either liquor, beer or wine, or just wine. And there's one other addition that was added in the legislature, was the requirement for a review and approval of the Moscow, or of the fire chief. So I'd be adding there that the Moscow fire chief would have a section to review and approve any alcohol catering permits. And so that would be the changes. If I'd have any questions, if you have any.
Questions for Rod?
I think it's a great idea.
John?
Oh, I would just make a motion that we approve the ordinance under suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings, and that it be read by title and published by summary.
Second
that. Who beat? Is that Gina?
Okay, yep, Gina Bisha. We got a motion by John and a second by Gina to approve the ordinance and the suspension of the rules requiring 3 complete and separate readings, and it be read by title and published by summary. We'll start with the roll with Walter.
Aye.
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 Okay, and this is ordinance number 2016-10. Got that one. An ordinance of the City of Moscow, Idaho, a municipal corporation of the State of Idaho, providing for the amendment of Moscow City Code, Title IX, Chapters 6, 7, and 11, relating to alcoholic beverages catering permits, provided the provision of this ordinance be deemed severable, and providing for this ordinance to be in full force and effect from the date of its passage, approval, publication according to law. Okay, we will move on to item number 10, which is Area City Impact Agreement Non-Conforming Use Amendment Request. Bill Belknap.
Oh.
Bye, Jim.
Bye.
God, I wanted
It
to
was
go
so-
on TV these.
I know. Just ran into the chair.
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of the council. Just to provide a little bit of background, the Idaho Code requires the establishment of an area city impact, which is a joint planning area around cities to provide for the logical and orderly growth of cities in the state of Idaho. The area city impact agreements include elements including the adoption of the comprehensive plan to apply within the area city impact, as well as the land use ordinances would apply within that area. That geographic area is generally guided by considerations of trade areas or geographic boundaries or roadways or other factors, and areas that are reasonably expected to be annexed to the city in the future. The comprehensive plan and ordinances that apply in the area city impact could be that it's the county's plans and ordinances, it could be that it's the city's plan and ordinances, or it also can be a combination of something that's crafted uniquely for the area city impact. The Community Development Department was approached this late spring, early summer by a property owner who was interested in replacing an existing single-family dwelling upon a property that was located within the area city impact boundary. Through the existing area city impact agreement that was adopted in 2006, the county adopted the city's non-conforming use provisions that address prior uses that were approved and allowed by law but maybe became non-compliant through future code changes that may have occurred. The city standards that were adopted to apply in the area city impact do not allow for the replacement or expansion of nonconforming uses except in very limited circumstances. However, the county standards do allow for the replacement of current occupied homes, even though they may exceed the current allowable densities on a single parcel of land. Within the area city impact, approximately 90% of that area is zoned ag forest, and generally only one single-family home is allowed per parcel in the ag forest zoning district. The county, which is largely ag forest throughout the entirety area of the county, encounters this situation more often in rural areas where you have family farms and oftentimes multiple generations of families that reside on a single property. So their code does allow for the replacement, expansion, or relocation of existing single-family homes, even though they may exceed the maximum residential density allowed in that zoning district. The concern with the city is that it does appear that the current nonconforming uses standards that are adopted and enforced in the area city impact potentially encourage the division of property to allow for families to enlarge, relocate, or replace aging homes. And so the only way, and in this individual that we were working with, the only way to allow for this replacement of a home that their family had outgrown was to try to subdivide the property and break it up and create a new separate building lot to accommodate their needs. This is oftentimes contrary to the city's interest, where the fragmentation of property near the city limit boundary can impede the city's ability to grow in a logical and orderly fashion. With discussions between city and county staff, we determined that it might be appropriate to adopt the county's nonconforming use provisions within the area city impact, since that much of that area is rural in nature and ag forest zone. The proposed amendment would not result in any additional homes in the area city impact. It would just allow for the potential enlargement, relocation, or replacement of existing homes within the area. The proposed amendment was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, who recommended approval. It is a very minor amendment to the existing 2006 agreement. It does replace the nonconformity sections as adopted in the city code to be the counties to apply within the area city impact. And this was also reviewed by the Administrative Committee on July 25th, who recommended approval to the City Council at that point in time. So with that, I would be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
So Jim, as Bill had said this one in front of the Administrative Committee.
Yeah, it was
last Monday.
We went through this, and it seems like a pretty straightforward thing to simplify that and improve the situation in the area of impact. So I would move to approve the ACI agreement amendment as presented.
Second.
Question, Art?
Yeah, I just wanted to explore a little bit that the intent seems good, but if a home is going to be moved or reconstructed, would there be the intent that it be moved or reconstructed in a way that wouldn't interfere with future rights of way or setbacks that might occur should that area be annexed into the city at a future date?
So the future rights-of-way is a more difficult consideration just for the building permit. So generally, unless the property is being subdivided and there is a dedication right-of-way that's occurring at that point in time, the construction of an existing home on an existing parcel, the owner has the right to really place that structure wherever they choose to. I'm sorry if I try to call the second part of the question. They'd have to comply with all relevant setbacks. So even though they may exceed the residential densities allowed on their individual parcel, they have to comply with all other provisions of zoning code, whether it's setbacks and other building heights and other zoning standards.
Yeah, because I was thinking that sometimes when we have projected street layouts going on, that it's an opportunity that if it would constrict the size of the street to the extent that it wouldn't be possible to put a street through. And then if you're going to build or move it, just shove the thing back to allow for full width construction in the future potentially. Just looking down.
And that's certainly something every building permit that is applied for in the area city impact comes to our department for review, and we can work certainly with the county staff to address those instances should they occur. We are oftentimes talking about very large parcels, with quite a bit of room around them. And so most often they're not going to be really in a constrained situation where we would see that. And then the setbacks we have present in the Ag Forest District are fairly significant. and the lot sizes are generally 40 acres is that minimum lot size. We're dealing with some fairly large parcels that we would anticipate seeing in these
But I'd rather
circumstances.
see kept as one, really, for
Sure.
the reasons you stated.
And that's really the intent, was to facilitate this. And I don't expect we would see a large number, but the county was appreciative if we consider agreeing to adopt this in the area city impact to help the residents in the area city impact.
Good question, Art.
Yeah, my question had to do, the question that Art just asked, is that how you addressed it, by writing in non-conforming use provisions? Is that what that language is? That in the ordinance kind of takes care of everything that you said, like all the little details that we can change or not change for setback is put into the language as non-conforming use provisions?
So what we would be doing, we'd be replacing our section in the city code of nonconformities with the county's. And if you do look at the replacement of nonconforming dwellings, it does refer that it must meet all other adopted standards for that development.
So you broadened it? Is that really kind of what you did?
We haven't brought it anything.
Then you made it run the same as the county?
Correct. It
Okay.
would just be
So that you
adopting
used
the
the
county
language that they
standards.
had, yeah.
Right, yes. The language that was included in your packet that we would just be taking out of their ordinance, and that would have become the section of the code that would relate to nonconformities within the area city impact, which is very similar to the city's language for nonconforming uses, with the exception that they allow for that replacement of residential structures, even though it may exceed the residential density limitation of the property.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I got it.
Walter, did you have
I have a question for Bill after the vote, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll start the vote with John. Wait a minute. I should say this. Jim made the first, the motion. John made the second to approve the proposed ACI agreement amendment. And so just for clarification, even though it was read that way, John, I'll start with you.
Aye.
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 Thank
And
you.
aye.
Thank you. Okay, Walter.
Bill, there's a comment in the CCNR that, quote, normally this would be incorporated within the upcoming renegotiation of the ACI agreement anticipated to occur through this fall and spring. I believe that the county came to us almost 2 years ago now wanting to talk about renegotiating the ACI, and if memory serves, we told them we weren't ready to talk about it because your department needed to work with their department to work out some language on stuff or whatever. Has any of that occurred, and where are we on renegotiating the ACI?
So the city initiated the conversation on renegotiation of the area city impact when the county was considering adopting an amendment to their land division policies. So we started that conversation and hosted them at a joint meeting. The conversation we had at that point in time was the city had a number of code updates it was working on, really a fairly large, substantial overhaul of our zoning code and the subdivision code. And rather than amend the agreement to adopt our current ones and have to go through another amendment process to adopt the updated codes, that we needed to get that work completed, and that was in the fall of 2013 into early 2014. That work has now been going through the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they're coming close to conclusion probably this fall to early spring. So once that major code overhaul is updated, then we would begin the discussion on the ACI. We have met twice with county staff to start the discussion on boundary locations, and we've identified what we think is a good boundary to work with. So they're just waiting for us to update and complete our code adoptions, and then we would start the conversations on the ACI agreement update.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item number 11, proposed FY 2017 fee resolution. Where'd Gary go? Are you going to do this for him, Jim?
For a minute.
He's out coughing.
You want to hop in here, Jim?
There he is.
You all right,
Sorry,
Gary?
Gary, I made an announcement, turned around, and you were gone. So- Okay. Well, I could have handled it. Basically, this is just about talking about the approval for a public hearing that we're going to have in 2 weeks. So.
Grab the light, Bill, please. Thank you. Okay, what you have before you today, as you know, staff prepares a fee resolution that goes hand in hand with the budgetary numbers. Typically, we try to have that fee resolution discussed during the budget process, and the budgetary revenues are predicated upon, at least the fee parts of them are predicated upon the new fee resolution. Idaho Code requires that any fee that is proposed to increase by 5% or more, or new fees, need to be the subject of a public hearing. We have had several times in the past where proposed increases in fees for water, sewer, sanitation, so on and so forth, have been less than 5%, and so we've been able to proceed with just council approval without having a public hearing. However, typically, as new fees come into place, for instance, we had a public hearing on a fee not too long ago about the barricade program. It wasn't much. It was, I can't even remember how much the rental was, $5 or something like that, but it was still a new fee, and if it was going to be charged by the city, it had to be subject to a public hearing. So we did that separately because we wanted to implement that program right away. So as going through these, we've already talked about when we have to do it. So we have just two fees that are being proposed this year. And as I indicated, today is just similar to a council workshop, presenting these for you to look them over. We will have a public hearing scheduled for the same night as the budget public hearing on August 15th. So we'll talk a little bit about the different fees. The new fees, as I indicated, there are only two of them, and that is Public Works engineering conditional use permit, special use permit review fee, because it does take staff time to review those proposals, and this is a fee that is reasonably related to the service being offered, which is another Idaho Code requirement. So that's proposed at $90 for that review. And then there's another fee that is still under consideration by the Farmers Market Commission, and that is a proposal that should there ever be sponsorships that will be pursued in the farmers market, and it may be a sponsorship by, who knows, some organization, say Wells Fargo wanted to sponsor something in the market, then they would be allowed to charge either somewhere between $300 and $1,000. Again, that program has not been approved. The process for that program being approved would be the Farmers Market Commission recommending it or not recommending it, and if it's recommended, bringing it to council. Council then will consider that recommendation, determine whether they wanted to proceed, or they could say, we don't recommend it, and then nothing would happen. But this gives the ability to charge the fee if the council approves the program. And as you can see, there was an email that went out, an explanatory email on some fees I'll note later on in the presentation. Because they are authorized, this is somewhat of a capacity document as well. It's similar to our budget, which is an appropriation document. What it sets is the maximum amount that can be spent in any budget year. You can always spend less, but you can't go over that appropriated amount without a separate public hearing and process, open budget process, if you will. And we'll be doing that fairly soon as well, just to take care of some grant funds that we've taken in, so on and so forth. Okay, so then we move to fee adjustments of 5% or more. And these are all in adjustments. We put all the adjustments in the note, that's the memo that's in your file or in your packet. So you see increases of 3%, 4.5%. If you look at sewer services, water services, and we'll get to sanitation in a moment, those are all pursuant to the latest rate studies, which were adopted by City Council or approved by City Council. As indicated, sanitation is undergoing a rate study even as we speak. It's not prepared in time for this presentation or adoption in this fee resolution. However, FCS, who is doing the consulting work on that, and they were the ones responsible for both the sewer, sanitation, and water rate studies, have indicated that the proposal of 3% increase is in line with what they're recommending with the new rate study. But again, that isn't completed yet, hasn't gone through council for approval, so sanitation is based on the 2012 rate study.
Yeah, I'm curious, Gary, because you got the public works stuff up there. You got 3%, 4.5%, 4.5%.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not 5% or more. I'm just curious why they're up there. Because that might not be accurate. Is that why you're?
No, we have to have a public hearing anyway, Your Honor.
Well, I know
so
that for 5%.
I just listed everything.
You just thought you'd throw it in there.
Yeah, this heading is incorrect.
Oh,
It should
okay.
just be
Oh.
fee adjustments promoted by
Okay.
the fee
All right.
resolution. Okay, police department name checks. Idaho State of Idaho increased their amount. This just brings us in line with them. And information systems, which is a little bit odd. We have not, for a lot of years, had fairly new service that we're providing. So rack space leases are for those providers who rent actually rack space or fiber optic capacity provided through our fiber optics network. And this allows us to charge a reasonable rate for that. So 3% is proposed by information systems. Sanitation, again, I already explained that. 3% across the board is recommended by the 2012 rate study. Parks and Recreation, daily admission prices for the Hamilton Low Aquatic Center proposed by Parks and Recreation Department. That was built into the budget and discussed in the budget document. Lifeguard and safety training, decreasing from $250 to $125. As you noted it in the budget document, we are adjusting our pay for our lifeguards because we're having a tough time competing with the state of Washington with their minimum wage requirements, so on and so forth. Well, an additional cost to our lifeguards is if they want to get certified, it costs them $250 to do it. So this lowers that cost, makes it more attainable for them, and again, hopefully will help us with our seasonal employment at the pool. We also have a deletion. The under miscellaneous fees, the weed control waiver, haven't charged that in a long time, so we thought, well, we'll get rid of it if we're not going to use it, and we haven't. So, let's see. And that is essentially it. They're fairly basic changes.
John?
Gary, there was nothing in any of the information about the farmers market fees. Why
Yes.
was that?
We talked about that. You'll recall in the budget
Workshop.
Budget workshop. I'm sorry, it's getting late. The Farmers Market Commission has been talking about adjusting fees to vendors in the farmers market for some time. The measurement for those fees were merely looking at other markets in the area and determining whether or not those fees should be applicable in Moscow. I've talked to Kathleen Burns about having a more systematic approach to that and actually looking at the cost of putting the market on and then determining how those fees should be adjusted according to a plan. It'll be more palatable both, I believe, to the council if they have a plan they can look at, certainly to the Farmers Market Commission, and I also suspect the vendors will be more amenable to a fee adjustment if they see what it's going to be spent on, if they see value for it. So the approach that we're taking is, and I've appeared in front of the Farmers Market Commission, it's similar to what we're doing in sanitation, John. Because the sanitation isn't going to change that much, we've utilized the numbers from the 2012 rate study. The Farmers Market Commission has been informed that since their fees really don't take place until the beginning of the 2017 market season, if we can get that information, if Kathleen can run that process, then the Farmers Market Commission can make a recommendation at any time, and we could have a public hearing on, if it changes more than 5%, we could have a public hearing on that in the fall as implemented then in the spring. So it's not, the 2017 market season and any fee adjustments is not off the table. It's a matter of approaching in a systematic fashion with a plan. And that's been what I've asked staff to do, and I suspect you'll be seeing the Farmers Market Commission looking at that later this summer and into the fall. We're working with Kathleen right now on that process.
However, this body does not need permission from the Farmers Market Commission to raise fees.
Absolutely not. Council sets fees. But I'm assuming the council would like to know, have a plan in place in order to implement those.
Walter?
If I may, John, as council liaison to the Farmers Market Commission since the 1st of January, they have talked fees at every monthly meeting. At one point, they were saying that there would be no fee increase for 2017. I took advantage of my role and told them that my gut feeling as a single member of this body was that the council would like to see some movement on fees for the farmers market, whatever that might be. They have had discussions about a disparity between what a walk-on vendor pays and a seasoned vendor pays. Seasoned vendors are about $300 a year. Walk-on vendors are, help me, Gina, 31 a weekend?
32.
If you come 31, 32, if you come 20 weeks, you're paying $600 as for fees. So they've been working with that. Their last meeting, I strongly urged them, because they're planning to have a meeting the 19th on this sole topic, looking at fees, John, and I urged the body, and I also afterwards urged the chairman to make progress. And I have, as politely as I can, told them what you just asked Gary, which is that the council does not have to wait on them to make a recommendation in order to act on fees.
Thank you.
Other comments? Well, so you just need a...
Mr. Mayor, another question on a different topic, please. Gary, when do you anticipate the sanitation rate study to be delivered as a recommendation to this body?
Yeah, I had a discussion with Tim Davis and FCS, I believe it was about 3 weeks ago, and they were running a couple of different scenarios. My anticipation is that it should be here sometime in September.
Okay, I just have if they're not through with it, and they're going to be another 30 to 60 days coming up with their final recommendation, I just have a little bit of a problem with fees being raised 3%. And we've got a formal presentation saying here's what they ought to be and why coming 30 days later. The effective date of this will be October 1, correct?
Yes.
So you believe that will come prior to when they would go into effect?
I believe so. I can't say that for sure. If it turns out that it is less than 3%, council certainly can direct staff to charge whatever that recommendation is. But it will take some time. Once we get the document, it'll have to be reviewed.
Correct.
Then we had a citizen committee who reviewed it as well and made recommendations to council. So if we get receipt of the document sometime in September, it will take some time to get it implemented.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Is the 3% premature in this proposed fee document that's before us tonight?
I don't think it is.
Based upon that.
I don't think so, because it provides capacity, and it is in conformance with the 2012. 2012 does foresee past 2016. I think it's 17 or 18. Tim wanted to redo it. As you recall, when we did it kind of out of sync, it was intended to be done the same time as a water and sewer study this next fiscal year. But because of the single stream recycling and wanted to check the impact of the roll cart program, he asked authority to move ahead, came to council. Council granted that authority. That's why we're doing it now. So I don't think it's premature.
Thank you.
Gary, you don't need, there really doesn't need to be a motion or action on this because it's going to be a
No,
public
the
hearing.
discussion you're having right now is
July,
exactly what I
Okay.
wanted to
All right.
engender, and that is to get your opinion, and we can move ahead based on that opinion.
I think you go ahead and move ahead. I think everybody's fine with that. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That was the last item, so I will go into reports, and I will start with you, Jim, Administrative Committee.
Everything that we discussed in last week's admin committee was on tonight's agenda, so I guess we're through with that. And any other commissions that I'm liaison for have not met, other than Smart Transit last week, and Gina was at that meeting. They have a new bus situation. They're still trying to work out where it was not equipped properly, and they're trying to get that squared away. But Jenny Ford's on the case there, and I think that'll get resolved right away. So that's about all I have.
Okay, Gina.
I sit on administrative committee, and again, we've dealt with everything. I did go to my first Parks and Rec commission meeting last week. We had a very, very interesting policy discussion. Kind of became a tad contentious. And so we've agreed that as a commission, we're going to go back together and talk one more time about things, and before they bring something forward to council. It was quite illuminating, and we had pizza.
Okay.
It was great.
Yeah, the dinner meeting.
Yeah,
John.
it was good.
The only thing I've got is the Human Rights Commission met on the 19th of July, and a couple interesting things. The Martin Luther King breakfast is set for January 21st of 2017, and the Human Rights Commission is involved with it, and it is put on by the Human Rights Task Force. And the Social Justice Forum, having to do with faith and human rights, they're still trying to nail down some speakers so that they can have a broader spectrum of opinions. And the Education Forum, Faith Healing in Idaho, they're maybe going to be able to put that on in November. They aren't sure. And the Pride Festival is coming up, and the Human Rights Campaign for Anti-Bullying, and the other stuff are things that are working their way up the ladder and will be dealt with in a more timely manner. That's what I have.
Okay, John. Art.
Public Works and Finance did not meet, so nothing to report there. Sustainable Environment Commission met and discussed issues associated with pollinators on the Palouse, and working with identifying the chemical list that the Parks and Rec Department uses on the various parks to try to eliminate neonicotinoids, which are apparently extremely toxic to bees. So they're working to review all the chemicals that Parks and Rec uses, just as they did some years ago with the Streets Department, and could give the city a clean bill of health afterwards. Had the presentation by Tyler Palmer on the review of the lead tests in city water. We're looking good. And found out that the U of I is replacing all of its fluorescent lights with LEDs. Some 60,000 bulbs are going to get replaced here in the next couple of months, which they apparently got a grant for the bulbs, but they're going to save a lot of energy.
If I may, the city is following that same program as well.
Excellent.
So we'll be replacing our fluorescents with LEDs.
And let's see, fair and affordable housing didn't have a quorum, so they just sat and discussed the questions they want to put forth for the city survey. And I'll let you deal with that one if you wanted to recap.
Well, I will. Okay.
So,
Catherine.
Yeah, Moscow Pathways was canceled, but Historic Preservation did meet on the 28th, and they're getting ready, their insert that they do once a year called Preservation Moscow, and it's going to be inserted in the Daily News, Lucent Tribune, and there will be some distributed over in Pullman, and Barb Coiner is the one that writes it, and Pam Overholzer is the one that does the graphics, and it's going to, they have, the theme is Moscow's living room. And so they're really looking at Main Street, and they've had a really good time coming up with Moscow being the focus. It's going to be really good, like 3 or 4 pages. So they're going to get it out to like 7,000 in all the subscribers. So that'll be really, that's coming up. And they'll have a timeline. Anyway, they've been really doing a lot. And then on October 6th, they've got the Orchid Awards, and they, of course, they want to ask you to participate in that ceremony. And
what's the date on that?
They've October 6th from 5:30 to 7:30. I figured they would be sending you an invitation, but I'll just tell you about it. I'm pretty sure they're going to send it to you, and it should be over in the Fisk room. And they're going to
let me write that down.
They're going to do information on they're launching Archipedia. And there's going to be information about the Fort Russell area, the U of I, and the downtown. And so that's really cool. They are having big conversations about interpretive signage on public buildings. There was a big question of how come the Methodist Church is on the city logo. So 'cause I would love to
Are you
get
talking about
his-
this right here?
Yeah.
Because we like it.
I
You tell them
know.
that.
I know, but
Kinda cool way to
so it'd
tell
be
it.
really
That
nice. I'd
question
like to
is
get
true.
information to bring back to that committee, so that'd be
Pardon
really
me for
fun.
interrupting, but which commission was this?
Historic preservation.
Thank you. That's not the one I would have expected to come from.
I can provide some information on that
Okay.
later on.
Okay, and then to the city, they're doing goal setting for the next 2 years. That's coming on, and then they would like to analyze the results of the city questionnaire that came out 2 years ago, because they're proposing their 2 questions, and so they came up with their 2 questions, so they'd be ready for the city survey that goes out in September.
Okay.
Yeah, good stuff.
Walter.
You'd think the Historic Preservation Commission would thank us for putting that not too young church steeple on the logo, but none of my commissions met, so
It falls in the historic.
Yeah, they weren't. It wasn't bemoaning it. It was strictly just trying to understand it because it's not a public building.
We build a bridge at
That's
3rd
all.
Street, it'll destroy it.
I had nothing, Mayor.
Okay. Very good. Okay, well, moving on. I had an airport board meeting on July 20th. And boy, talk about, it was kind of fun. I went out there about an hour and a half before the meeting and watched the skidders and zooming around the NASCAR racetrack they had on these big earth movers. It's pretty fascinating. The good news is I wasn't driving one of them because there's no way. Somebody got ran over. But they're making progress and they're moving a ton of dirt. And I told Art that first Monday, the Monday before that meeting, which would have been the 18th, I guess, they moved 40,000 cubic yards of dirt, which I thought was an incredible amount.
So quite a lot more than a ton.
Yo, yeah, absolutely.
I took pictures and thought maybe we could put them on the website.
And also on the 20th, we had the joint meeting with the city of Pullman. We had the mayor from there and councilors. We had a wonderful time at the 1912, and there was a total of 40 members from both Pullman and Moscow that joined, city supervisors, engineering, police chiefs, fire chiefs. And it was a very nice meeting. It was really cool how we had it set up, and people were intermixing around the table. And the thing about those joint meetings, the good thing about those joint meetings, it just knocks down any barriers that you have, because we really shouldn't have barriers. We're moving along. They're separate cities, of course, and separate states, but we're all part of the Palouse. We need to work together and make things happen in our area, whether it's the 2 universities or the 2 cities or the 2 states or county on this side. We are the Palouse, and there were some great conversations on that, and I was very happy to be a part of that. So as long as Mayor Johnson and I, we went back and forth on things. It was a very fun evening, well set. Jen did a wonderful job getting it set up, her and Chelsea and others, I guess, but it was a very nice event that night. And then on July 29th, they met with Cynthia Gibson, who is the executive director for the Idaho Walk Bike Alliance. And that was kind of a fun thing. I spent about 2 hours with her, and she was interested in where our underpass on Highway 8 and White Avenue was going to go, because we got the grant for that. And she was wanting directions for this and that. So I said, well, come on, hop in my car, and I'll load you up and we'll zoom around town. So I took her around. We spent about 2 hours just going through all the various spots. We stopped, and I said, no, you can walk down there if you want. I'm not, because I got my dress pants on. I don't want to get all those thorns and stuff in me. And so I was teasing her a little bit, but she had a really good sense of humor. And I showed her the north way where the pathway would go, and she was interested in Heron's hideout. And I said, well, it's going to go right down there. So I drove down there and showed her where that entered. And I took her to spots where they'd come out in blocks that I knew. And I said, people can walk this, they can bike it. And they took her to the Chipman Trail. And she actually had a bike. And Jen set it up so her companion was coming to town that evening, so we could get a bike for that guy so they could just ride around our area and stuff. But I took her around and she really was appreciative of it, and she's from Boise, and she said, Boise people, why, they just don't understand how great Moscow is. And I said, well, they got to get out of Boise to figure it out first, get them up here, and once they get them up here, they can figure these things out. And so we just had a great time. It was a very nice, entertaining time, and we'll see more of her. And she's tied into with the tourism and stuff too. So. Gary, that's all I have. You have anything?
Yes, on August 10th at the Best Western, we are having a monthly, is the monthly breakfast meeting, but because the Wallace has some things going on, we'll be having that at the Best Western. So at noon, contact Judy and she'll get you set up. Also, can't believe the mayor forgot to re-announce the mayor's golf tournament on the 12th. $300 for a team of 4. All proceeds go to the Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse, second annual. And the mayor says he's taking on all comers, so might be some side bets going on.
Well, there is.
Who do you sign up with for this, Mr. Mayor?
Who did I sign
No,
up with?
who does? I have a team. I
Eric
need
Newell.
to sign
Eric
up.
Newell at Egan. And my son, did you spring it on Tyler Palmer? the
I've
bet?
not yet. I haven't.
Okay,
I
all
saw
right.
him tonight. I forgot to tell him,
Okay,
but I
well,
will.
Okay.
We're working on a chamber team, too.
Yep,
Yeah,
I see that. Good.
I have 3 or 4.
No, we've got
lined up.
4. We got 4 of us.
Yep.
Okay.
Walter, you had a comment you wanted me to comment on?
I was telling Judy something afterwards.
Oh,
Okay. Anything else? I'll stand for a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn, Mayor.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No nays. 9:51. We're closed. We're out of here. Thank you.